G'day, Dark Walkers. AOS Coach here, and we are talking all things Beast of Chaos. I have the Dab Man himself, the Nuge SoCal's finest, Matt Nguyen, who you probably already know from this channel. He's been on here at least once, probably if not more. You've been on here a few times now.
I've been on here twice. Thank you. The first VOC video and then the LVO recap, which was
Yes.
really fun to do.
Yeah, we're Singlet brothers here. So, but for anyone who doesn't know who Matt is, he is a top Beast of Chaos player. You are currently ranked #1 on the ITC when it comes things Beast of Chaos. You've done incredibly well at the Nova Open, as well as Old Town Throwdown, just to name a few tournaments in the current season. But we're going to revisit the faction. We are going to talk about where Beast of Chaos stand in the current meta. You obviously came out hot at the start of the new battle tome, which was January this year, 2023.
Yeah, it came out with gifts, so right after LVO.
Yeah, I remember recording things just before getting onto a flight to LVO, and obviously we got to talk about Beast of Chaos. You took the meta by storm for a little bit, and not that you trailed off, but there hasn't been really any heavy nerfs. There has obviously been a bunch of stuff with the current season around Antorian Locusts. So I thought it was a really good time to revisit Beast of Chaos to understand where do we currently stand in the meta. What are our top picks? If I was going to go to a tournament, what are some of the things that I'd be thinking about? And even how do I start kind of handling the meta, whether it's Seraphons, Soulblight Gravelords, Ossiarch Bone Reapers, Slaanesh, like how do I handle it as a Beast of Chaos player? But that's what today's video is going to be about. Matt, introduce yourself for the folks who don't know you.
Hey, my name's, am I looking at the camera? Yeah, my name's Matt Nguyen. I started Warhammer, Age of Sigmar, and tabletop games in general in 2019 after living abroad for a long time. And, started competing in RTTs and GTs in 2020 when Gareth Thomas was hosting around, and then stuck with Beast of Chaos in the old book for a long time. Then they got their big buff, and now I've been to many tournaments at this point, and I'm also currently the captain of SoCal United. So yeah, it's been a fun time. Love going to GTs, love going to events, seeing people. And I also host RTTs, and I'm planning to host another GT myself because I enjoyed it last year, this coming January. So, yeah.
Mr.
Nice to meet
Utility
everybody.
himself does everything for everyone. That's really cool. That's really cool.
Well, they call me the team soccer mom for a reason, because when we travel out of state, sometimes when we drive, and I take the family van, so it's like, yeah, I also like micromanaging things sometimes. So yeah, that's how I earned the title.
I can confirm that you did drive people to LVO, and I stayed at your house, although I didn't actually drive with you. A bit of a shame, but Beasts of Chaos. Let's talk about this army. So for anyone, obviously 9 months ago, we caught up not long after the Battle Tome dropped, and we kind of talked about it in the context of the current season, which was Galatian champions, a lot of small heroes. They were doing a bunch of things. They were tunnel mastering. They were being generally annoying. But we've had, obviously, a new change. We've had wizards with the Wizard Finds of Antor. We've had Hoarfrost. We've had Merciless Blizzard. We've got the wizard meta, which could be good for Cygor. There's so much going on right now. Maybe let's start at the top. How are you finding Beast of Chaos in this current season of Wizard Primal Dice goodness?
So, compared to the last season, I actually think Beast of Chaos is in a better place, even though we weren't bad last season. But I think because a lot of the missions were just scrum in the middle, which Beast of Chaos, even though we are a combat army, we don't actually like just grinding in the middle. We're not a grind army. We like to ambush. We like to cause as much chaos as possible while we score. But that's just the nature of the army. And then, especially in this GHB, not only are the objectives more spread out, all the battle tactics are really different in that you don't have to kill to win the game. And combined with Beast of Chaos tactics, which we'll look at later, you could actually just play Beast of Chaos could actually play the game without killing much, and they just can win by off of scoring. So even though right now win weight rise, I think we're at a 48 last time I looked at it. We're at a really I think right now Beast of Chaos can generally take lists that we want to, as long as we try to tailor around playing around the battle tactics and everything. And because we don't have to like be over committal, that means we don't have to risk much to score victory. So yeah, I think we're actually in a really nice place, and I can't wait to review the rest of how Beast of Chaos interacts with GHB.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because unlike Gits, which is the direct competitor who came out at the exact same time, there were so many things that happened in Gits. Gits probably came out with a stronger win percentage, often off the back of the squigs. You then saw a bunch of points increases like Scragrod, and there's a whole bunch of things that got changed, right?
Yeah.
Rules got changed. The squigs can't do anyway. This is not the squig show, but Beast of Chaos didn't seem to get that type of thing. You
So
guys
we
have
did
been
get
relatively unchanged, relatively.
Yeah, so we did get some notable point changes that did mess with list from the last JHP to this JHP. For example, Doom Bull was 160, now he's 180. Bulgors were I think they were they were 180 or something like that. Now they're 210. And then Raiders, which were at 110, now went up to 130. So that definitely changed our list a lot because I guess the points went up because of how Beasts were performing at Worlds, with Bulgors and Ungor Raiders just being really effective, especially in a teamed environment where you can just put them in the best matchups and they can generally like do very well. So other than that, though, Beast Chaos players like myself have like adapted to these changes. They weren't as drastic as like let's say Gits was, even though Beast of Chaos is like when the win rate came out. I think Beast of Chaos is an army where if you go against them the first time because of all the mechanics that we have, it's really like wow, it's like in your face. You don't know how to respond, but if you play against it enough, you understand like how to be able to play against Beast of Chaos, which is why the win rate has leveled out to be like in a balanced like medium. Because Beast of Chaos is an army where it's very much the General's army. If you're able to pilot it really well, you can do really well with it. So yeah, that's kind of like the beauty of it.
So how would you explain it? Like if I was at the game store and I'm like, okay, I'm going to pick up Beast of Chaos. I love this monstral kind of corrupted army. I've seen some people playing it and it looks really cool. And I haven't really dabbed into it just yet. How would you describe their play style and potentially their strengths and weaknesses?
So, so they're definitely their strengths. So if I had to like really think, really like try to nail it down to a few. So one of the strengths of our army is null deployment. BOC is the only army in the game with the ability to null deploy our entire army. What null deployment is that during the deployment phase, instead of deploying a unit on board, we can deploy it off board. Because we're able to deploy a good part of our army or what we want to do off board, it gives the Beast Chaos player a lot of tactical flexibility, and then it makes it difficult for your opponent to read you. So I guess if you really enjoy that kind of thing, then try Beast of Chaos. And then also we have a lot of utility and mechanics where like we're just able to interact with the flow of battle outside of killing opponents. We have a large model range because BOC is from Warhammer Fantasy. So there's a lot of like you can make any kind of Beast of Chaos army you want. And then we have 4 diverse sub factions, which changes the way how you play the army. So that's what is also incentivizes, maybe another incentive for people. And also we're a glass cannon army, which means big damage, and people like seeing damage. So that is the strength of our army. If I have to describe the weaknesses, we have low armor saves. The best armor save in Beast of Chaos is a 4-up armor save. Generally, everything else is a 5 or 6-up save. And because we're low armor save, we're very fragile. And if you don't, because you have to play like carefully, and since we have 0 recursion tools because we don't have the 4-up rally anymore, Beast of Chaos are very susceptible to being doubled. And then we don't have huge spell casting bonuses. We only have 1 cast. And then we have low bravery, so 5 to 6 bravery. So if we go in against anything that can mess with bravery, we don't like that. And we're not an army that actually likes to trade. We just like to. I think we're almost like I think we're like Sylvan up in that guard where we just like to punch and then not like to get punched back. So yeah, that is the strengths and weaknesses of Beast of Chaos.
I too like to punch and not get punched back. I think we all can at least
Yeah.
feel that, right? But you're right. Like when you think about Beast of Chaos, and the first archetype that comes to mind, if you are someone who's played them before, is the ability to come in from the side of the board. So if anyone doesn't know the term null deploy, we're talking about in the deployment phase, you don't have to traditionally put all of your toys in your deployment zone. You could put your Ungor Raiders, you could put a bunch of things on the side, and they can come in on different points of the board. And maybe you can explain a bit more about how that's actually a benefit, because as a Stormcast player, being able to drop things on the board is really helpful, right? It means that, actually, no, I'll pass it to you. Why is the null deployment, or being able to deploy a bunch of troops outside of traditional deployment areas, helpful in a tournament, or even to help you win games?
So it's helpful in just tournament or not tournament game. Like, it's helpful in general because, like I said earlier, Beast of Chaos units generally have low saves, and because we are susceptible to also low bravery, we want to always engage the opponent on our own terms. So what that means is that no matter how the opponent deploys, they always have to be very mindful that we can just appear anywhere on the battlefield when we come out, and we're able to hit them really hard. Like, they can't actually, if they could try to screen out a Beast of Chaos player, but we have some tools in our army that lets us deal with screens or any attempts at trying to zone us out. And then we also, for example, can charge in the combat phase with with special command ability that we'll go through later through Bulgors and the Doom Bull itself. And yeah, and because we also null deploy, we can also deploy anywhere on the board. So it lets us play for tactics like surround and destroy, intimidate the invaders, and then other Piece of Chaos tactics where it's just take an objective with a unit of 10 or more. So yeah, I think that's why Beast of Chaos while they're not like I wouldn't say that they're dominant, but they do show up enough at 4-1 and occasional 5-0s from players like Owen Jackson, Noah Singh, you know,
Yourself.
they're yeah. Yeah. I wasn't gonna say anything.
Yourself. Like, I'll call it out. And like, one of the things that I think, there is a steep learning curve for this army. Like, I feel like it's got a similarity to Lumineth, where when you start off as a Lumineth player, or you start off as a Beast of Chaos player, there's a lot of tricks and shenanigans that you learn over time, and you often will get it wrong the first time, but then through refined practice, and when to pull the trigger, and like, how much do I put into reserve, when do I pull them out, like, they're all things that you kind of learn along the way. So there's a steep learning curve with Beast of Chaos, unless you just put everything on the table, you run forward and hope to smash, which might not be necessarily the best plan.
It's definitely fun though. But yeah, I agree with everything that you said there.
I play Gits. I love to run forward and smash, but because you don't have, as you mentioned, the recursion, being able to bring back bodies, very easily. You don't have a lot of other shenanigans, and you don't want to get hit. You might find that you don't want to do a lot of a bravery tests as well. Again, like my Gits, so like, I do not want to take multiple bravery checks. Keep those Geminids away from me. Keep that bloody Gravetide away from me. Like, I need to win the triumph, because otherwise, like, a double battle shot can be brutal against me if I lose a bunch of my low bravery idiots.
Yeah, of course. And also, I do want to emphasize a point where this is an army that you need constant repetitions in. You can't just pick up the army and do well with it once because of how squishy the army is in terms of just saves and bravery. And then sometimes, because the army, I would say, is a Johnny kind of army, which what Johnny is essentially is a term for magic, where it's like it relies on a lot of like tricks and maneuvers to like pilot towards victory. So a lot of the synergies in the army are not obvious when you first read it. It only becomes obvious when you start talking to other Beast of Chaos players or playing it yourself, and then you develop your own style.
And I'll plug my own Discord at this point. Mate, if you are a Beast of Chaos player, we have an incredible channel for Beast of Chaos. So come check it out. And you're right, and it also works in your favor that, like, if I haven't played Beast of Chaos before, or I'm not well practiced because I don't have a Beast of Chaos person in my region, it's hard to look at a Beast of Chaos army and go, what do I kill? What are my target priorities? And how do I, as you said, score by battle tactics, screen out and zone off the board to stop ambushes? How do I take out particular pieces, and which pieces do I pull out? Not that it's a gotcha moment, but it's not as obvious on what the linchpins are to the army.
Yeah, I think for opponents, it requires a couple of games against Beast of Chaos to actually understand what it does. And then they're also better able to assess the weaknesses, and then they can play around it. And I will say the mechanics of Beast of Chaos can be gotcha-ish. So I always encourage Beast of Chaos players to thoroughly explain our mechanics, because if someone doesn't know what it does, they could be in for a hard time. And no one likes to play gotcha hammer. We always like to play for a good time. So yeah.
Yeah, look, I've never had a bad game against Beast of Chaos. I've never felt bad that someone has pulled the wool over my eyes. But there are a lot of tricks, and again, coming from armies that have plenty of tricks, it's just being able to pull the trick off at the right time. And
Yeah.
like, it's not easy. It's not easy.
Yeah, a lot of it is timing. So that's the important thing.
Have you got any favorite units in the current season? Maybe something that wasn't so good in the last season that's had a glow up. Maybe something that has had a points adjustment that is now in your favor. Obviously, we've had lookout sir rules change as well, so it means protecting our small heroes is a lot easier. Anything that's kind of really stood out to you between seasons, or just something that's really working right now in the current Generals Handbook?
So there's two units that actually really stand out to me right now that I didn't really look at last season, but when I looked at now, they're really impactful. The Zangor Shaman and Slongors. So for the Zangor Shaman, I think because we didn't really have any bonuses to cast, and his bonus, but he can get +3 to cast, and he can cast a second spell once per game. But because we didn't really have any spells from last season that were really impactful, we didn't really look at it too much. But now, because of spells like Horror Frost, Blizzard, and other things that are out there, we actually now I really like the Zangor Shaman, because even though he doesn't have the 18-inch range for the Rituals of Ruin, his is only 12 inches. He can still be like a counter punch piece where he could just blast someone with Blizzard, just in case anyone gets into like our lines. So that's why I really like him now. And when we go into my list later, I'll also explain the more intricacies of why I think the Zangor Shaman is really good. And then the other unit is Slongors. Slongors actually became considerably cheaper, and I like taking MSU units of them to just clear screens, because sometimes, so we have a unit called Ungor Raiders or Archers, where they have 21 shots, 4s and 4s. So sometimes they can spike, sometimes they don't. But if Raiders can't finish the job, then I like to have the Slongors go in and just clear screens, and they can double fight once per game. So I think therefore, even though Beast of Chaos doesn't like to trade, it lets Slongors are cheap enough to let me trade and force the opponent to like come out of their like deployment or castle.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember doing the Beast of Chaos review, and I'm pretty sure I said, like, this is the season, not the season, this is the time if Slangor are ever going to be good. Like, this is the time. At 130, they've got some interesting attacks. MSU, by the way, if you don't know, is minimum size unit, so don't reinforce the unit, just keep them as units of 3. Being able to double fight once per game, which is really neat. There's a couple of interesting rules on there. Although they hit on 4s, wound on 3s, the damage is decent enough that they're worth the 130. And most
Yeah.
people are just going to ignore them. Like, they haven't seen Slungor on the table. They're like, just ignore them.
Yeah, so I guess the nice thing about them is that even though they're like 5-up saves, 3 wounds each, which is like, not crazy, because they can double fight, and because they can have up to like, I think if they have 13 attacks by a unit of 3 of them, 2 damage each. And then with Beast of Chaos Rend, they can get to easily Rend 2 or Rend 3 if they survive long enough. So that's what makes them really punchy. And if they're able to double fight into something that's like higher than their points cost, then like to me it's worth it. Like it's just, and also because of spells like Horror Frost, you can actually get, if you want to build around it, you can get them to hit on 3s or 2s, and that significantly ups their output. So yeah, they've definitely surprised me with how effective they've been, and I think they are the sole reasons why I did well at Nova with the 6-2 record, and then Old Town Throwdown I played in the final against Gavin. Definitely credit Slong Wars towards my path to victory.
Slangors are OP. Go buy them by the bucket load. No, like they're
Yeah.
a cool model, and I'm glad to finally see them. And it just shows you, like, models aren't always good, but there is always a time where they will shine under the sun. It might just take a couple of years. Poor
Yeah,
little
and
Slangor.
I'm an avid Beast of Chaos collector, so I bought Slongors when they first came out 2 years ago, and I painted them, and now like I can bust them out, so it makes me really happy. And like you're saying, Warhammer models, like I guess if I have to think of a comparison, they're like stocks. Sometimes the stock goes up, stock goes down, and it always comes back around again. So don't sell your stuff, keep it. It'll pay off. Your loyalty will pay off one day.
What about the Cygor? And I call that specifically the Cygor because I remember when the Battletome first came out, we loved the anti-magic properties of whether it's the Quake Fray or even just the Cygor independently. And people were talking about it as a potential great unit just to have in your collection, to bring it in even as an ally. Like I was talking to Blake the other day around Blades of Corn, and we talked about it potentially as an ally to double down on the anti-magic side. Is this a good season for the Cygor, given there's primal magic and we're trying to stop more magic, and there's critical spells that having extra boost would give us a leg up?
Yes, so that's the unit I actually did forget to highlight, but thank you for highlighting it. Cygors were, when I look at their war scroll when the book first came out in January, I really liked it, and now I like them even more, especially in a sub faction called Quake Fray, because Quake Fray makes Cygors battle line and they make them priests. And they give a prayer to a Cygor where you can just have models on objectives. And then because they come with 2 unbinds, and every time you cast, you take a mortal wound, and combined with Primal, they're just a solid anti-magic piece, and it actually hits hard for what its War Scroll is. Like it's very well rounded, it's effective, and I wish I could fit the Cygor more in my lists, but because I build mine differently, sadly I can't. But they're definitely a prime pick, especially in Quake Fray, where I feel like they're fully maximize their potential. So yeah.
Mm. I haven't seen Quake Fray really hit the table yet. I'm super curious, especially with some of the mortal wounds on an objective. I think there's some interesting rules in there, but I'm yet to see it, which is kind of disappointing. But also, I kind of realize that maybe you're doubling down a little bit too much in Quake Fray.
So one of the lists we will look at later is the Quake Fray list that I. So if you remember the last piece of chaos player interviewed, Brian Cox,
Oh,
he's a good friend of mine. We talk a lot, and that list is something that we worked on together, and he's piloted it and take it to a good amount of 4-1s. So I can't wait to look at that later for someone that let's say if you are a Beast of Chaos player watching the stream and you don't want to look at Dark Walkers all the time and look at other options, there will be other options we will be looking at later. So I can't wait to explore that.
as well as the Michigan GT list that did incredibly well over the weekend too. So we'll have a diverse set of lists to kind of look over and give you a bit of thought around how you might build your current Beast of Chaos list in 2023, GBH, Antorian, Acolyte, Wizard stuff.
Yeah.
Speaking of wizardies, we have the rules, and I guess we'll kind of mix it up here between Generals Handbook 2023 and Beast of Chaos, and kind of merge and get some of your thinking around the current season. But let's start off with the Entor rules, and first off, you've got one with the land. So basically, we know that a wizard with 9 wounds or less that's not unique is an Entorian Locus. Is our only selection the Great Bray Shaman? Because obviously Grashrak is a character. Is a shaman?
So right now, yes, it's only from. Let me look really quick because I know it's not the Zangor Shaman because he's on a mount, so he would not get it. But I'm pretty sure it is just the Brave Shaman, like you said. Yeah, it's
Uh,
just the Brave Shaman. But if you give a Doom Bull or a Beast Lord a Arcane Tome, then you'll also get the Locust keyword.
the wizard hero with 9 wounds or less that is not unique. So there's nothing about mounts, or am I losing the plot here?
Oh, oh, I thought there was something with mounts. Oh
Let,
wait,
let me let me have a look.
yeah, because sometimes I heard that yes, they don't need a yes, the amount is required, or no, it's not,
Let me have a
because
look.
I've heard it like bounced around. So
Anyway, like, all right, I'll look
yeah.
this up while we're chatting, because I always like, oh, is the Beast of Chaos Zangor Shaman a Entorian Acolyte, Entorian Locust? But with you, you have obviously the ability to choose either an extra spell cast and spell attempt, or do you get yourself in? What do you find if you're given second in the battle round? Do you often go for the extra CP, or are you going for the extra cast and the unbind?
So sometimes because I have a warlord battalion, if I'm going second, so it allows me to have some CP, and if I'm going second, I have a good amount of CP anyway. I think because it's all done start of hero phase, I see if I can get a hero if I do the heroic action for CP, and that kind of lets me determine, okay, do I want the extra cast? Do I want the extra unbind? Or another command point? I often go for the extra cast because Beasts of Chaos do generally have like good war scrolls on their thing. Or maybe I want to cast Mystic Shield, Arcane Bolt, and then let's say some other spell like Blizzard or whatever. So I actually do like the extra cast because it also gives you an extra unbind. And when you're going against some armies that really want to get their key spells off, and with how primal dice are, you can actually unbind their key spells if you give yourself an extra unbind, which is critical.
By the way, I know where the confusion has lied on the Entorian Locust. So when you look at the Entorian Acolytes Battalion, it specifically says that the battalion wizard can't have a mount. But the realm rules says that Entorian Locust you don't need a mount. You can have a mount. So unless I'm completely missing an FAQ or an errata, it should allow you to
No,
have
no, no,
a.
you are right. Yeah. So the mounted wizard can't be in the battalion, but they do get the locust keyword. Okay.
Sweet.
Well,
Yeah.
I wish I knew that because I just played it off as I can't be one because I'm not a mount. But okay, well, great for.
Maybe rules could have been clearer, and potentially we would have had like just keep the same thing between the battalion and the rules. But anyway, let's talk wizard primal magic dice. We generate them. We hopefully know how this all works. When
Mhm.
you think of primal magic dice, when you are playing with your list, are you building into your list? Are you building into that battalion? Are you playing into generating as much dice? Do you need the critical spells? What comes to mind when it comes to the primal magic dice?
So, because of the way I build my Beast of Chaos list, I don't start most of my heroes on the board because the way how Beast of Chaos work is we're able to do our rituals of ruin, like such as making a unit come closer to a board edge 2d6 or taking mortal wounds d6 from the board edge. So, because we're off the board edge doing that, the battalion specifically requires you to be on board to get the extra primal dice. So, for me, even though I sometimes would have loved to have that battalion in some of my lists, it's better to just play around the fact that I can just play off board and where they can't touch my heroes, and then I can interact with the opponent in a way that like I can mess with their plans and then cause general chaos because that's the theme of the army. So it is a good
Are you,
battalion, but I I don't think Beasts of Chaos need to rely on it as much as other armies do.
are you keeping wizards on the table to stop, magical dominance, battalion, battle tactic? Are you just keeping all of your wizards off the board?
So it's matchup dependent. Like, let's say if it's an army that can get to that wizard easily, then I have it off board. But if I know that they can't, then I have at least one wizard on board because I tend to find players give Beast of Chaos players first. So I, for example, do magical dominance, and then that's generally a guaranteed tactic unless I miscast or primal miscast. But yeah, it just, I mean, having at least one wizard on the board, which in my list are Zangor Shamans, they just cast their spell and then they move 16 away and just wait to see how the rest of the game goes.
And are you using your primal magic dice to boost the spell cast? Are you finding it is better to save them for unbinding opponents' spells? Like, where are you spending your resources? Obviously, uh, matchup dependent, situation
Yeah.
dependent.
Yeah, like you said, there's not really a straightforward answer. I think it was really dependent on like the matchup, if they have the battalion or not. I also have to like look at the spells that the opponent has to like see, okay, do they need this critical spell to go off? Yes, then I save the dice to try to unbind. If their spell isn't as critical, then no, I try to save it for Blizzard or like some other spell or something that I like to have in the list. So yeah.
Yeah, I probably find keeping my primal dice for unbinding more often than trying to get a spell off because look, spells are nice, don't get me wrong, but I always want to unbind the critical spells because I know from my armies, and I imagine you're the same, because you don't have a lot of magical dominance in your army. You don't need all the spells to go off to make your army successful, but certainly
Yeah.
other people's do. Certainly people do, like whether it's protection of Hirsch, whether it's like obviously you can pull out any particular army, and there's always that one or two critical spells.
Yeah. So the way I think of magic in a Beast of Chaos army, because it's not the strength of the army, if I'm able to get a spell off with my wizard, to me it's more of a bonus if anything. It's kind of like a backup plan. It's like, okay, maybe I need this to happen, but if this doesn't happen, I'm fine. Like I have other the army itself has so many other like ways to play around the game where like we don't play if these spells or unbinds don't happen the way they do or cast, then I'm like, okay, I just shrug my shoulders and just move on.
And that's literally my point is that, probably for a Beast of Chaos player, I imagine keeping those dice for unbinds will probably generate you more benefit than trying to boost off a particular spell, unless it's a critical spell you need at this particular time.
Yeah, that's honestly what it comes down to. You generally I save it for unbinds, but if I want to get Blizzard off or like magical dominance, then like I use it for that. So just it's
Sure.
situational.
Yeah. There's no silver bullet to this. It's either like it's obviously pick your obviously, don't use a primal magic dice if you roll a 1 in your original spell cast. At least that's my advice.
Yeah, no, I've learned that lesson too many times in my practice games where it's like, I sometimes I think with the mindset of, 95% of gamblers quit before they win, but that's just my Vegas mentality speaking to me, and then I get punished because I roll another one. So yeah, if you see a 1, just don't even bother.
Yeah. My opponents always try to goat me, and I'm like, damn it, stop it. Like I will take your bait. I'm like, nah, like you chicken. I'm like, yeah, I am. Like I'm not doing it because the mass effects of a bunch of mortal wounds happening from the little explosions, I can't afford with my bravery 5, 4, 6 idiots.
Yeah, and I feel like because it is a mechanic in the game, I always feel like if there's a chance that you could primal miscast, it almost feels like 50% of the time it will happen, even though it's technically a 1 in 6 chance.
Yeah, it happens. I was about to use an end command. Was it 70% of the time? It happens every time. Yeah, it
Yeah.
happens more than you realize. But with your allegiance abilities, like you've referred to Rituals of Ruin a fair few times already. Before we get into that particular part, when you look at, let's say, the Beast Herd ambush or even the Master of the Wilderness, is there things at list building that you consider, right? Because during deployment, instead of setting up Beasts of Chaos units, you can put them into reserve, which is a great change from the last book. If you are just picking this book up for the first time and you haven't looked at it since the old book, it was restricted to only
Wholly
the.
within 6. Yeah, and then you could only put as many units off board as you did on board, like Stormcast. That was the old restriction, but now new restriction is much more flexible, and now it's wholly within 9 rather than wholly within 6, which is like extremely like it helps with a lot of plays.
So, to revisit the rules, so I can put units into reserve. I can put as many units in reserve as possible. They must come out either in my first or second movement phase. So I can't hold them back till turn 3. They've got to be down or they're going to die. And they come on the side of the board outside of 9 inches from enemies, but within 9 inches of the battle board. So you think of the battlefield, that's a lot of space. Whether I deploy it still in my territory, I put it on the flanks, I put it in the backfield in my opponent's territory. How do you think about it? Do you put certain units in there? Do you will you put 50% of your army in reserve? Will you pull it out turn 1, turn 2? Situation aside, give me some starting points as a Beast of Chaos player on how to make the most of this particular rule.
To make the most of this particular rule, you want to assess how the opponent deploys, and this is why I always advocate for Beast of Chaos players to go high drop, because if they go high drop, they can always wait to see how the opponent deploys before you can decide what to put in ambush, because it's every game is different because maybe sometimes I want one unit on the board, sometimes maybe I don't. It's kind of like, I guess the whole theme of this video is that like whatever you do with this art, every decision you make is very situational. There's not like a one game plan where it's like, okay, if I'm playing Lumina, I really want the extra CP spell to go off to mess with the opponent. Where this is like you want to wait to see how they deploy, and then but generally my game plan is I put hammer units like Bulgors because they hit really hard off board. I have my Ungor Raiders also off board because they could shoot off board once per game. But then then I have most of my heroes off board except one wizard on the table, and then maybe like a chaff unit to hold something. Or maybe I have a unit like Slongors or Zangor and Lighten on the board behind the chaff to like hit back if anything charges my chaff. So that's kind of like how I approach deployment with this army. You want to put most of your army off board, but then you want to have some pieces on the board so you can do tactics like surround and destroy or magical dominance turn 1, where you don't have to interact with the opponent as much until at least until turn 2 or turn 3.
All right, I'm going to give you some situations in a second, but I want to call out probably 2 units that are probably really popular for the ambushing. One is your Ungor Raiders, who can shoot off the board. So when you're in reserve, you can't do shooting. So I can't deep strike my long strikes in Stormcast and then shoot you off the board. Ungor Raiders do. You pick a point on the battlefield and you can shoot, right?
Yeah, so when they pick a point on any battlefield edge, they have to pick whatever. So they pick a point, and then whatever is the closest enemy unit within 12, they can shoot that unit. But then
What?
you can.
Keep going.
Oh, but then you can ask, oh, so what if the opponent just puts like a unit that you don't want to shoot at in front of that unit? I'm like, yeah, they could do that to prevent the Ungor Raiders from shooting, but that's why, which we'll go over the Rituals of Ruin, you're able to use mechanics where you're able to. So this is one of the synergies of the army where you're able to pull a unit 2d6 closer to the board edge. That's like that wasn't within like let's say the range of the Ungor Raiders, and then they'll be shot at the start of the moon phase. And because it's at the start of the moon phase, your opponent cannot all out defense. So it's just a bunch of 4s and 4s, random shots, and then it's just trying to like. And usually the combo with that is that you're just trying to kill screens to open up your hammers to be able to charge in later. Or it forces your opponents not to have screens, and then they have to put something valuable that they don't want on an objective, which lets you charge them.
The other unit that I wanted to call out from an ambush before we get to the Rituals of Ruin is the Doom Bulls, and specifically what makes them. Sorry, not the Doom Bull. The Doom Bull as a hero really enables the Bulgors to make the most of coming from Deep Strike because you can do the hero phase charge, so it allows you because
It's a combat phase charge.
Sorry, that's what I meant. Sorry,
Yeah, no,
what I was trying to
good.
say was what I was going to say was what it allows you to do is charge in the charge phase. You do get your +1 to the charge from the Beast Herd ambush. If you fail this, and let's say you roll the CP and you still re-roll and fail it, and hitting an 8-inch charge is not easy, but you then have a second bite at the apple through the Slaughterer's Call via the Doom Bull to then go for another charge. So all of a sudden, you think that after 3 dice rolls, you would have a much better chance of hitting the charge than not. Yeah, you can't all that attack them because you've received a command to charge in the combat phase, but it does mean that they're not just sitting out there doing nothing.
Yeah, and Bulgors are also able to essentially double charge if the situation is right because they do mortal wound impact hits when they charge. So let's say they come out of ambush, Bulgors charge like a screen unit that has like 3 units left. They kill the screen unit with impact hits, and then the Doom Bull issues the start of combat phase charge. And the nice thing about the start of combat phase charges is during both combat phases. So you can also do this during your opponent's turn. So you can like maybe do mind games of, oh hey, if you charge me, I'm going to charge you back and do a good amount of mortals. So yeah, I think that's another strength of the army to be able to essentially pile through a layer of screen to get into the juice.
Yeah, and it does say the combat phase, not your combat phase, which is a huge difference.
Yeah.
Huge difference. So we've alluded and referred to Rituals of Ruin many times. You just talked about the blood taunt. So there's a couple little things, like give me the overview of like how you look at Rituals of Ruin, because I know there is a command trait that allows you to do, is it 2 of them, or there's some shenanigans you can do for multiple
Yeah,
Rituals of Ruin.
so there is a command trait that lets you do 2 Rituals of Ruin on a hero. However, if you do the second Ritual of Ruin on that same hero, you don't have to take the mortal wounds. So to be able to do these Rituals of Ruins, like it shows in the video slide, you have to either the hero either has to take D3 mortal wounds or make another Beast of Chaos unit within 3 inches of that hero take D3 mortal wounds. If you're off board, then you're not able to pass it off onto another unit. The hero has to get D3 mortal wounds. However, this mechanic also has a risk, because if the hero takes D3 mortal wounds and it kills the hero, which has happened to me before, then the heroic action doesn't trigger. So it's always kind of like a gamble. It's like, okay, first turn, I cut myself for D3, I take 3 mortal wounds. So now it's like, if I roll a 2, my hero is just dead, or out of D3. So it's just kind of like, you want to be very mindful of how many mortals you decide to take from these Rituals of Ruin, so then you don't kill yourself. But the trade-off is that if you don't kill yourself from these, then the effects that are listed on the table are very powerful, and they help make the army work. Like, Rituals of Ruin are a core part of the Beast of Chaos Allegiance abilities, and they should always be taken advantage of. And the nice thing too is that, like, so while you can only do 1 Ritual of Ruin off board, if all your heroes are on board, you can do multiple Rituals of Ruin. You just can't do the same Ritual of Ruin.
And it's worth calling out that it's also going to directly compete with your heroic willpower, heroic recovery, some of the other heroic abilities. So you will be choosing if you want to get the extra unbind, the extra extra command. Do you?
So there's an FAQ. Yeah, there's an FAQ, and they finally clarified this when I talked to Gareth Thomas and other GW employees and TOs. So when they call it a heroic action, it's actually not a heroic action. You can do this in addition to heroic action. So it says it in the battle tome, and then they have to FAQ it because the wording wasn't clear. So it's even stronger where you're able to do both, and also because Rituals of Ruin are now FAQ to be start of the hero phase. So, for example, you could cut yourself for D3 mortal wounds, and then you could do the heroic action heal.
That makes a lot of sense, because I hated the trade-off. I'm just having a quick look to see if that is actually in an FAQ. I don't recall seeing it, but the ritual.
Yeah, and also in the battle tome, like it says, like, even though they call it a heroic action, it says you could do it in addition to any of the normal heroic actions.
Awesome. Cool. I'll take your word for that one. I trust you as a glorified, amazing Beast of Chaos player. You'll know your rules better than I do. When I see it says heroic actions, I think of heroic action.
Yeah, again, the wording of it is, like, in my opinion, not great, and it's really confusing, because when I first looked at the book, I was really confused, and I got multiple clarifications from TOs and then other people that talked the rules team, and that's like, okay, this was their intention. And it also says in the book you could do this in addition to heroic actions. So yeah,
cool. I don't want to hop on it. Like it. Cool. All right.
yeah, no, I think it's good that we talk about this so we can make it clear to people who are getting into the army, so they're not confused. So it's good that we're having this discussion.
Great.
Yeah.
What are your favorite heroic actions? So you've already talked about Blood Taunt. And I realized I didn't actually ask you the question about the Beast Herd ambush, so we'll go back to those scenarios after we finish Rituals of Ruin. But are there either favorite Rituals of Ruin, or are there situations that you are looking for? Like, I want to pull the hero out away from the chaff and be able to shoot it off with Youngor Raiders, as an example. How else do you use the rituals?
So my favorite Rituals of Ruin are Warping Curse and Blood Taunt, because, for example, Warping Curse, more straightforward. Being able to do free mortal wounds to an enemy can be really impactful. Maybe, let's say you cut yourself for D3 when your hero's off the board, you target an enemy like foot hero. Maybe you just roll 5 or 6 and that just kills the hero. So it just messes with their plans. So really effective at doing that. But Blood Taunt is definitely, to me, the strongest one. because being able to like force a unit to move a certain way is more impactful than sometimes just killing it. So for example, when I played against OBR a lot, and if they give me first, I actually like to pull like when a Mortis Guard were a thing. I like to pull the Mortis Guard as farther as I can to the board edge. And because even though OBR isn't like the slowest army, some of their units are slow enough where it's like if you're able to like pull units like away from an objective or towards the board edge, it forces them to take an extra turn to move to where they want to get to go. Another use of Blood Taunt is, let's say your hero is on the board and you want to prevent a redeploy, you're able to actually drag the enemy unit into combat with the hero with 2d6 if you get them within 3. The only restriction is that enemy unit cannot be in combat, and when you pull the enemy unit into the hero, those two cannot be within, or the enemy unit that's being pulled in cannot be within 3 of any other Beast of Chaos unit. So it's kind of it's a weird it's a niche restriction, but like, and it doesn't, the opportunity doesn't present itself all the time, but it's definitely come up enough where like it's helped me win my games. So you have to think, when you use Blood Taunt, you have to think about, okay, when you move something towards the board edge or closer to your hero, what are you trying to accomplish from it? And that changes depending on how the game is going.
By the way, I'm just rereading the text there, and it does say that you can carry out the heroic action in addition to any other heroic actions. That's the assumption that they can carry out heroic willpower, heroic blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
So I see like it's just buried in a bunch.
Yeah, it's buried in a lot of text, so that's why like it does come up.
Any other ones? Like I remember when I was looking at them before, I'm like, some of them are really interesting. Some of them are like, the Alpha Instinct is interesting to be able to stop a unit from taking Battle Shock, in a turn, which is neat. The Ward I thought was okay. Like I wasn't like okay, I guess.
Yeah, my problem with the Ward one is that if it was within until your next hero phase, then I really like it. But because it's only limited to like, that turn, it's not that really impactful, and you're much better off doing the other things. At least with the Battle Shock one, even though it's only during that turn, let's say if you're taking multiple combats on different units, and because Beast of Chaos has low bravery, sometimes I've even done the Alpha Beast Instinct just to make sure that Battle Shock doesn't happen because I'm fighting on multiple like fronts with it wholly within 12 of that hero.
All right, couple of Beast Herd ambush examples now, and then we'll kind of move on. So let's say, for example, I am a castle army. Let's say I'm a traditional Lumineth or a Seraphon or a Zinch, where I've castled up with a bunch of chaff. I've got a juicy little center of like I don't know, Lord of Change or a Hurricanum or a Teclis or like just some type of like wizard castle, which is very common right now. Do you have any thoughts around how you would use the Beast Herd ambush?
So if I'm playing against like castle or shooting armies, I generally put most of my army in ambush because I don't want to be affected by, like, let's say if I'm going against Seraphon, I don't want to be affected by their, AoE. Like they could spread out global mortal wounds with Comet's Call to different units, and then that triggers battle. So I try not to stay on board. At least maybe I have 1 or 2 units on board because, or if I'm going against Lumineth when they had a lot of Sentinels or Slanesh with Bliss Barbs, if they're not able to touch me, then it actually makes them play in a way where it's like, okay, they can't be as aggressive as they want to be, and maybe they won't get on objectives because of it. And because they're not able to essentially hurt me in their turn, in my turn, I can play very aggressive by using Ungor Raiders to clear their screens, and then Bulgor's charging, or they charge in the combat phase to avoid Unleash Hell. So that's how I generally deal with like castle armies and Beast of Chaos. The strengths of their army combined with their rituals of ruin lets us be really good at fighting elite armies or castle, or we're very good at like fighting through like shooting castles and just, we're known as a castle breaker army.
All right, one more example. Let's say it's something like actually 2 more examples. Let's say it's Ossiarch Bone Reapers with, let's say, a Mortis Guard or Necropolis Stalkers or a Gits list that's like heavy trolls, right? So lots of small 3-6 man blocks of troops run around the board. They don't take a lot of footprint, but they're durable as hell.
So another strength of the army that Beast Chaos is good at is because we don't want to take we don't want to fight. We don't want to we're not like Iron Jaws or get squigs where we want to just get stuck in and just fight. We want to we want to spread out the opponent, and because of how our Beast Herd ambush works, if we're able to spread out the opponent, then they're not able. Then we're able to just mess with their plans. We're able to force them to like spread out their army. Like let's say they're a castle, but they have to get on objectives. So okay, then I have to leave my castle, and then if they have to go away from like let's say a hero or like something that protects like those units, then like animalistic predators, Beast of Chaos units are able to just hop on those vulnerable units when we want to. Like again, I wouldn't like if I have to like think about it like from the fluff. Beasts of Chaos do not take honorable fights. They take the fights they know that they can win, and that's how you're supposed to approach it as a player. You only take the fights that you know that you have a chance at winning. If it's a toss up, you try to avoid those because we're susceptible to being have low saves and low bravery
Yeah,
due to our glass cannon nature.
and it's great you've got the flexibility to respond where you think the weak point is, as opposed to being forced to fight a fight that you don't want to fight because it's just where they've put the points on the board.
Yeah, I think that's why Beasts of Chaos generally favor maps that are not scrum in the middle. Because if we're forced to like scrum in the middle, then our opponents can take advantage of our weak saves, and it almost forces us to have to rely on a winning the priority from like bottom of the turn to the new top of the turn. And I generally don't like relying on playing for a double to win because our army doesn't need to do that.
No, in fact, playing for the double to win is a terrible tactic. You should be playing to lose the. You should always have the mentality that you're going to lose the double, so that if you do lose the double, you're not surprised that you've lost the double and you've got the appropriate buffs and you're ready to respond, as opposed to playing for the double, not winning it, and then you feel like you've lost the game because you've screwed yourself in your positions or your buffs, or you don't have the tools to absorb the double.
Yeah, and essentially because of how whatever our allegiance ability states, we have to come by the end of our turn 2, because if it gets to battle round 3, all of our units are dead in ambush. So generally, I actually want to go first as a Beast of Chaos player in turn 1 because I want to have a greater chance at winning the priority from 1 to 2, because I actually like to give my opponents a double, because if most of my army's in ambush, they can't actually hurt me with a double, and then from 2 to 3, if I'm playing from the bottom of 2, then I can threaten a double, or at least position in a way where even if I don't win the priority from 2 to 3, I'll be like fine.
I'm glad you said that, because that was literally going to be my next question is, come turn 2, do you want to drop your army at the start of the top turn, or would you prefer to go at the bottom? And I think, again, in situations are going to vary, but if you can hold out to go bottom of turn 2 and then with some luck win the priority, that will give you a better yield than dropping at the start of turn 2, then getting doubled from turn 2 to turn 3 if you get the choice.
Yeah, and I think the double from 2 to 3 is always stronger than the double from 1 to 2. But I will say in some matchup, like let's say if I'm going against like Seraphon or a castle shooting army, if I have a chance to take the double, then I will, because then I'm just able to knock out their ability to just be able to give me some pepper.
Yeah, and obviously in Seraphon, you can reduce the amount of summoning if you can get to them earlier. But what about your command traits? Let's actually get into some of the nuance of the army, right? So do you have any favorite command traits currently? And I've got on the screen both your Generals Handbook choices for Antorian Locuses and your Battle Tome. Like, are they ones that you favor the most, and why?
So so if I have to pick 3 command traits from all of these, I actually like Slake Fray, Reveler, Shaman of the Chilled Winds, and Bestial Cunning. So to start off with Slake Fray, Reveler. So let's say our general the move characteristic of our army lies between 6 to 9. If you're able to boost the movement by +3, then everyone is moving between 9 to 12 potentially, which is a massive boost in speed for the army, for an army that's already generally pretty fast. And because the only requirement is you have to be within 6 inches of a terrain piece, not wholly within, just within 6. And if your tables have like good enough terrain where it's like sizable, you're able to just take advantage of that speed and like be everywhere. So you generally want to take this command trait if you're actually playing a Beast of Chaos army that isn't relying on ambush. There is ways to build the army around not just ambushing everything, which I'll go into later. So yeah, I really value this command trait because everyone getting +3 move, and movement is, you know, one of the biggest things about, you know, doing well in Age of Sigmar. And if you're able to move faster than your opponent, then you're able to get on top of objectives quicker. You're also able to dictate engagements when you want to. And yeah. And then if I have to talk about my second favorite command, or it's not, I wouldn't say second, but like my other favorite command trait is Shaman of the Chilled Winds. This is for a more niche kind of list if you want to rely on buffing your units with Hoarfrost or using Blizzard when you need it to be. But I think if you have a shaman like the Zangor Shaman or the Bray Shaman that knows, you know, all the spell lores, you're able to have enough flexibility to be able to cast the spell that you need at that time. And if I'm taking Shaman of the Chilled Winds, then I've tried a list where I took the battalion, and it's like it's been like successful. So that's why that command trait is. I wouldn't always pick it, but it's interesting to me out of all these things. And then finally, my favorite command trait is Bestial Cunning, because while our restriction from coming out of ambush is wholly within 9 of a board edge, Bestial Cunning allows you to pick one unit after deployment to come within out of 7 inches anywhere on the board, not wholly within a board edge, anywhere on the board outside of 7 inches. So the usual combo I like to do is have it Bulgors have a net. So Bulgors have a natural +1 to charge. In our Allegiance abilities, you get another +1 to charge when you come out of ambush or a setup. So when you come out of ambush outside of 7 inches, you actually only need a 5-inch charge to get to where you want to. The fact that you're able to like have any unit come within 7 can really like hinder your opponent's game plan and lets you get on top of and prevents your units from getting screened out as much as prevents your units from getting screened out. So yeah, so those are my 3 favorite command traits, even though all the other ones do have like their uses, but you have to build around those command traits.
Yeah, and for folks, if you're wondering how you do a 5-inch charge with the Bulgors, it's because Bulgors with their musician get +1 to the charge. Then with your Allegiance abilities, you get +1 to the charge when you set up. So all of a sudden, 7 turns, 9 turns to 7 turns to 5, which means, you know, statistically, even without a re-roll, you're going to probably hit the charge. If you have to re-roll, use a CP, then you definitely, like, unless you're really unlucky, you will hit the charge with Bestial Cunning. And any Stormcast player will know the value of a 7-inch charge because, like, statistically, it's like 50-50. So,
yeah,
love it. I was going to say, though, one that I'm surprised you didn't mention was the Twist Fray Cursed Beast, given that you get to add the number of battle rounds to the casting roll. So given that, you know, you might have a Hoarfrost, you might have a Blizzard, you might have just one of your regular spells, getting a multiple to cast may mean that either your cast is off the charts if you add a primal dice, or it means you put your primal dice into your unbinds and still get off your spells with a really good dice roll if you're adding the battle round.
So I liked Twist Fray Curse Beast more when Arcane Tome actually gave you an extra cast, and then they FAQ'd that to not being the case. So if you took Arcane Tome before, I could make any of my Beast of Chaos 1 wizard casters to become 2 casters. That's what I saw more of a value. But because all of our wizards are 1 cast, except the Zongor Shaman, who can only do it once per game, and then you can only get the extra cast if you're the Andor, if you go second in a battle round. It's just too situational when it comes up. And most of our spells are 12-inch range. So let's say, and you generally don't want your shamans to be super close because they have low saves and it's really easy to kill them. And you generally want your heroes alive as long as possible. So I used to like Twist Fray Curse Beast a lot. Now it's not as much. I will give a shout out to Skullfray Gorehorn because let's say you put it on a Beast Lord, Doom Bull, or a Zangor Shaman. If they're, let's say you charge it in your general, and then a Bray Herd unit like Zangor Enlightened or Bestigors, giving them more attacks is like helpful. But I think like Twist Ray Curse Beast, Skull Fray Gorehorn, and the rest of the command traits that I didn't mention, you really have to build around these command traits to make it work. Where I feel like with Bestial Cutting, Slake Fray, and Shaman the Chilled Winds, you don't have to revolve your entire list around those command traits as much.
There's a lot of utility in the ones that you called out, which is for me, I always value utility. I'm never really a big fan of doing just one drop battle regiment, execute a plan, the end. I much prefer the chess type of utility, being able to respond to all matchups. Do you find yourself in a situation very often where you are taking a nullstone adornment? Like you'd have to be avoiding your shamans to stumble into this, right?
Yeah, and sadly, so when it comes to the Rituals of Ruin, so when it in the Allegiance ability, all Rituals of Ruin are within 12 inches to be able to do the effect. However, the Bray Shaman, they extend their effect by 6, so essentially they have an 18-inch range for the Rituals of Ruin. And because most of our wizards are heroes outside of the Doom Bowl and the Beast Lord, um, you generally always want to take like at least a shaman or two shamans so you can take advantage of the fact of magical dominance and other things. Could you build a list that uses Nullstone because you have units like Cygors and things, and Beast of Chaos um, tactics are like diverse enough where you can just like not take magical dominance? Yes, but I personally wouldn't recommend it. Although maybe someone will surprise me and be able to make a list around this. I think our casts are generally just too valuable to like not use, especially because we can use spells like Hoarfrost and Blizzard.
Maybe in like a Quake Fray, or if you were running like an all Doom Bull type list, sorry, all Bulgor list, yeah. But I feel like you will probably have a shaman or two. So um, I don't think I've seen very many lists without a wizard in beasts.
Yeah, and Beast of Chaos army, aside it from being an ambush army, it also likes to play in a way like combined arms force. You want to have like multiple units that they all have a role to like work together. We don't like to spam things because even though maybe if we spam a unit, they're only good at one thing. I like to take a collection of units where they're good at multiple things, so I have a toolbox of like answers of how to respond to things.
Yeah, that's definitely kind of changed between old book and new book, where a lot of your allegiance ability was just Thunderscorn, was just like it was very very regimented. Now that mixed force seems to be a lot more popular, which is great. Again, I talk from experience with Gits, whereas it's like play all the squigs. Like, well, I don't want to play all squigs. I want squigs and trolls. And
Yeah.
why don't you spell loss? Let's talk the top three. Let's talk about the General's Handbook ones before we get into your own.
Yeah.
I'm going to start with the one that's probably going to be the quickest answer, and that is Rupture. Do you see much value in Rupture as a choice, not as Shaman of the Chill Lands?
No, I saw it as a choice before because there was an interaction with the incarnate where you can rupture your own incarnate. So I did mess around like a degenerate, like other people did with rupture incarnate lists. But they obviously, that wasn't the intention of rupture to be able to rupture your own incarnate and then feed an L spell. That interaction was ridiculous. And now they made it to only affect, the always intention was you could make an enemy incarnate go wild, but because not a lot of people are taking incarnates nowadays because it's gotten really expensive and people have learned how to play around the incarnates. I don't really look at rupture anymore. It's not
Yeah,
really needed.
it was a flash in the pan. We had fun while it lasted, but right now, would I take Rupture as a choice? No, no.
Yeah.
I just even like with endless spells, I don't see a lot of value in making them predatory. Just
I think
not
the
a
only
lot of
reason
value.
why you would take rupture is if you're playing in your local meta and a good amount of people are taking incarnates, then like, yeah. But it's more of a super niche choice. If otherwise, no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Obviously, if you got Shaman of the Chilled Lands, yeah, makes you've got it right. Use it when you
Yeah.
need it. Let's talk Blizzard. Blizzard being the most obvious of them. You range of 12, you get it off, and it's 4d6 mortal wounds of goodness. Sorry. Yeah, you do a 4d6 mortal wounds of goodness. Do you use this often? Because you said that you don't like getting your wizards too close to combat, but this forces you to be within 12, and it obviously you can no longer teleport and then do Blizzard in the same turn. Not that you have a lot of teleports, if any, but you definitely could turn 2, drop out of ambush if you go bottom, and if you win priority turn 3, then Blizzard if you are in range.
So I don't use Blizzard offensively. For the most part, I actually use it defensively. In that, like, let's say, um, my Shaman is down, and then they're usually behind like a chaff screen, or they're behind my Bulgors, or like something like that. So I like Blizzard on my Shamans because it effectively turns them into a trading piece. So let's say if the opponent gets close to me and they don't like double me, for example, or they're not able to kill my Shaman for whatever reason, then it allows essentially to turn my 100-point Shaman or 120-point Zangor Shaman to essentially like a nuke. Like it lets me like, okay, well, I don't have any other good spells to cast, and it's more as if like I don't rely on it. It's more like a, if this goes off, this is fantastic for me. If it doesn't go off, fine. But that allows me to essentially tell my opponent, hey, there's a chance that if you get within 12 inches of this Shaman, um, I could do 46 mortals to you, which could entirely change the outcome of a game. And it could make opponents make different decisions, makes them maybe not want to charge, and then it just gives. I think the way I like to play Age of Sigmar is I like to give opponents more decisions to make, and make how to like defeat me not straightforward. And I think that's one of the ways that you can do well at Age of Sigmar. And also a trick that I like to do with Blizzard is that even though you can't teleport anymore to do Blizzard, so we have one of our rituals of ruin, Blood Taught. If they're within, let's say, if you have a Bray Shaman, um, if they're within 18 inches of you, or if they're within 12 inches of you, or let's say if you have 2 heroes, you're able to pull that hero closer to the hero with Blizzard, and then just do your shenanigans. So
I
that's
love that. I
yeah,
love that.
so that's a dirty combo. So while you can't teleport, you can still pull them closer to your Blizzard. And if I see an opportunity, I'll do that.
And it's interesting, right? Because the psychological threat, it makes it very much almost like a Godtrek where people want to stay out of a bubble of Godtrek because, he moves and obviously the charge. So the best way to kill Godtrek is actually not to engage him at all and just keep this clear bubble. Blizzard can often be the same where people are like, I will try to avoid that 12-inch threat. And, and people think of the psychological, well, it could be 4d6, but failing the many steps of having to be within 12 to roll a casting value of 12, not roll a bunch of ones, and then to pull it off.
Yeah, like I said, for me, it's not a strategy. It's more of a trick up my sleeve. It's more like a plan B. It's more as if like, okay, if this happens, that'll be really great for me. If it doesn't, at least the threat of it is like, sometimes the threat is better than the actual like outcome. That's what I've learned.
100%. What about Hallfrost? Because one of the interesting things with your army, given you have the ambush, is you're not going to be able to Hallfrost, let's say, your Bulgor, get their attack up, so their hit up, or whatever it might be, then charge them in from ambush. You really have to walk them up the board, or you're playing in subsequent rounds after the ambush. So, do you find value in Hoarfrost? And if you do, are there particular units that might benefit more than others?
I do find value in Horrorfrost, but I think unlike Blizzard, where like in most of my lists, I just put Blizzard on all my wizards because it just lets them be cheap hammers. Horrorfrost, I really have to build around that spell because, like you said, the unit has to be on the board to be affected by it. But there are other units in the army that hit hard, that benefit extremely for Horrorfrost. So you're not reliant on having your Bulgors. So some shoutouts, I will have our Slongors, Zangor Enlightened, and the Gorgon. So a lot of the army base hits on 4s. So and that means we hate -1s to hit. We always want to save CP for all out attack. Horror Frost essentially lets us let's say if we're able to roll a 1 or a 2, we can make a unit hit on 2s, which dramatically increases the output of the army, because at best, most of the time, most of our army can only hit on 3s at best with all-out attack or something, or damned. But if we're able to hit on 2s, that dramatically increases the output of Slongors, who have 13 attacks, 2 damage each, or 6 Zangor and Lightened, who have 19 attacks, 2 damage each. And then it just lets us like push out damage from a unit that otherwise usual math doesn't allow. So I do like Hoarfrost a lot. You just have to build your list around that spell. Where let's say with Blizzard, you generally don't have to. It's just there just in case.
All right, can I tell you my favorite unit to put it on, and you can tell me if I'm dumb or not?
Yeah.
You ready?
What is it?
You ready?
I'm
gonna pull out a Perla. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Gauze with a pair of Hacken Blades.
When Galatian veterans were a thing, I would have really loved that interaction, but sadly, because GVs aren't a thing anymore, they can't really swing as much over it. But I've seen other players, for example, that play Beast of Chaos, like Jacob Brandon. It's a really good East Coast player, make use of that, because I've seen him like try the combo, and it's definitely effective. Not my favorite unit to put it on, but because if with paired axes they have a lot of attacks, it allows them to be a cheap hammer. So yeah, no, I definitely see the use of it.
Because they're 3 attacks each, hitting on 4s, wounding on 3s, no rend for 1. Okay, very unassuming profile. If you roll the 1 or a 2, then now they're hitting on 2s, wounding on 3s, and with the
Hearthstone,
with your Herdstone, you'd have at least rend -1. But if you got the 5 or the 6, you could make them rend 3, issue all out attacks. They're hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s. Are they 25 mil or are they 32 mil bases?
They're 32s. That's why I like them a little less.
I was thinking they were 25s. I was okay. I was thinking they were 25s, but still 3 attacks each on even a unit of 10. Like, it's not bad.
It's definitely not, but there's better units where we could put Hoarfrost on, like I said, because Zangor and Lion Slongors have 2 damage, and then Gorgons, they can have potentially 3 damage each on each of its attacks, and then because Gorgons are able to effectively give themselves Rend 3 even by round 2 or Rend 4, making some BOC units hit on 2s, or even let's say if you already have Bulgors on the board, because sometimes the best play with Beast of Chaos is actually to not charge sometimes. It's to like screen and then set up your hammers, and then it's like, okay, I could charge you, or you have to get through my screens to be able to charge me, and then I can just charge you back. And that's when you want to use Hoarfrost.
Unless you screen with Ungor, then you can just in the combat phase retreat instead of fighting, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's like Furies. That rule is fantastic.
Yeah, it's neat. And like steal an objective, get out of combat. Damn it! I wish the Gore theory worked. I'm like, yeah, 25, 3 attacks. This is hot. Not so much. So we talked about the benefit. Go on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the base size prevents that unit from being effective. Otherwise, I agree with you.
Made sense in my head until we put the base into theory. But you talked about Blizzard. You talked about Hoarfrost. Is it worth more than the Thunderscorn or Bray Herd wizard spells? Because there's some good stuff. I remember Tendrils of Astrophy kind of popped out to me very, very quickly. There's a couple of good spells. I'm like, you know what? It's a hard trade. Or do I go something like Warlord or Command Entourage, getting me Magnificent, to go 2 spells on my wizards?
Yeah. So I think to start off with Thunderscorn, all the spells are actually the effects are actually really strong because we don't have an innate bonus to the cast. That's why I don't like to rely on them too much, even though they're all if you look at them objectively, they're really powerful spells, especially Raging Storm and Tendrils of Atrophy. But when I think about Thunderscorn, the only problem is that only the Shaggoth can cast those spells, and the Shaggoth is 275 points for a hero. That's 10 wounds on a 4-up save. And you don't have any bonus to cast, and he's a 1 cast. So if the Shaggoth is cheaper, then I would like the spells more, especially Hailstorm, because able to have a move run or charge was insane, and that's what made the Shaggoth so good in our last book. But because everyone was taking the Shaggoth last book, that's why they've overpriced him, because of the sins of the past. So sadly, I'm not really looking at Thunderscorn as much because the Shaggoth is too expensive.
Which is funny too, because people were just using the Shaggoth to generate primal magic, the primal cord,
Yeah, the summoning points, because he
the summoning
always
points.
so he always used to heal 1 wound at the end of every combat phase. Now he heals on a 2-up D3. So it's even better, especially with Rituals of Ruin, because you take D3 mortals. So I think that's why they price him to be as expensive, because he actually synergizes with um taking more wounds, because he just heals them back up, unlike the other heroes. However, it's just that he's just too expensive, and our army has transformed from being a horde army where we took a bunch of bodies on board to being almost like a semi-elite army in a weird way.
All right, before we move on to the Bray herd, let me just ask you really quickly about the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth. Currently, it sits at 270 points. What is the price point that you would be looking for to introduce you to this list? What's the
Honestly, this
minimum?
might.
What's the minimum? Not like some ridiculous number. Like, what's the minimum you'd need to see it?
I mean, I think my answer is gonna be ridiculous either way, to be honest, Coach. But it would have to
250.
be 210,
Okay, that's a
because
big drop.
it the reason why I say that, because the rest of our army is so expensive, and that like you can't. We only the Doom Bolt, for example, is 180. He's only that expensive is because of his really powerful command ability. If he didn't have that command ability, he'd be overpriced. The rest of our heroes are like 100 or 120 because it fits. They're like cheap wizards. That's what they do. The Shaggoth's attack profile, in addition to his tools, isn't enough to justify being almost like 300 points, because if you compare him to, like, let's say, 3 Dragon Ogres who are 210, or 3 units of or 3 or MSU Bulgors for 210, they do a lot more than what the Shaggoth does. And because he's a one cast, and because of the spells that we went off, it's even with Primal, it's not reliable that he'll get the most out of his points. That's why I feel like he has to be significantly cheaper for me to look at him.
I think you're being a bit too hard on the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth, right? Like when I reread the War Scroll, it shrugs spells and endless spells on a 4-up. You can heal D3 wounds at the end of the combat phase on a 2-up. And then on a 2-up, you can deal D3 mortal wounds to your opponent. It's a 10 wound wizard that casts 1 spell, unbinds 1 spell. Decent save. And it has both a shooting attack and some melee. So, not, I don't know. Like, yeah, 270 is a bit rich for it right now. But, 230 to 40 might not be too bad in the current meta.
So to clarify, I don't think his profile is awful. I think for me, it's just the points, because the way I think about points in this army is that, like, yes, he's a really good war scroll, but the problem is at that price point for a hero, you have to really build around that hero. And Beast of Chaos doesn't want to build around their heroes. We want to be able to be a tool set. We want to be able to, like, take as many things as we need to, especially because with our low saves, and yes, he is 10 wounds on a 4-up save, but in the context of damage in this game, and like compared to other tankier armies, he's not as tanky, where like he's not as survivable as he like needs to be, because when Beast of Chaos lose our units, we can't come back. It's not like we're playing old Beast of Chaos where we can just rally and then just summon and not care. We care very much now, because every body that we lose, it hurts us. That's another like weakness of Beast of Chaos. We actually really want to keep our stuff alive as long as possible.
I think the interesting question here is the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth worth 2 Great Bray Shamans that you can put in Antorian Acolytes Battalion? Like generating the extra CP, so to have the extra primal dice, having an extra spell cast. I think that's really ultimately the question. And folks, you can listen and you make the decision. I think most people would probably go Great Bray Shaman currently.
Yeah.
But I think the War Scroll is interesting enough with the Shaggoth to be considered. But I agree with you 100%. 270 is definitely too high.
Yeah, like I said, so some units in Beast of Chaos are overpriced. Every unit in Beast of Chaos has an amazing war scroll. It just comes down to how much they cost, and then you just have to build around it. That's how the balance of the army is. And it's like, it's good, but I think when it comes to what you want to do as Beast of Chaos, you never want to put your I mean, okay, you'll look at my list later and kind of laugh at what I'm about to say, but you don't want to have too many eggs in one basket. Yeah, and I feel like, and if you are going to in Beast of Chaos, you want to make sure that they're going to make up for all their points. The Shaggoth sadly doesn't. If he had an extra cast, I would consider it more. But because he's only a one cast, and because Bray Shamans can do their rituals room within 18 inches, and if I don't have to take a if I don't have to take a Shaggoth, I could take two Bray Shamans or a unit of 6 Longors, for example, which would be 260, or a Gorgon, which is 240, which like just does more in other ways. Like that's kind of where I'm coming from. And because, like I said, spell casting isn't the strength of the army, and I don't like relying on it. That's why I don't advocate it. But I think for me, because I'm a Timmy slash Spike kind of player, I like to play around reliability as opposed to okay, where Johnny, for example, made they like playing around combos. I don't like playing around combos too much. I like playing around the fact that each role does its different, does its role really well, and I know that they're always going to do it their job regardless. But that's just how I play. So that's kind
I
of like
both
my input.
agree and disagree. I actually have no
Yeah.
real opinion when it comes to the Shaggoth. I personally wouldn't put it in there, but I just don't. Yeah. Anyway, I think we talked too long, but I think within
Yeah.
that, no, but I think within that discussion was really good insight around how you think about this selection. Because you're right, at an individual war scroll level, there's some really good choices and there's some really interesting things. But is it worth it ultimately when you're in list construction? Is it synergizing and working the way you want it to work? Because when you look at, let's say, for example, and this comes up often with the Cygor individually is a really cool war scroll, but it's often one of the units that gets dropped from people's lists really quickly because it's not doing a lot of stuff for their army, and maybe it's too many points when they could double down on more other things. So there's some good insight I just want to call out from that.
Yeah, I think list building with BOC is always it's always interesting. It's always a fun challenge because you want to make sure you maximize all of the war scrolls that you're taking in an army and the points to its best potential.
Yeah, yeah. What about your favorite wizard spells from Brayherd? Is it Tendrils? Is it Vile Tide? Like, what are your favorites?
So I guess with Primal Dice being a thing, I actually like Tendrils of Atrophy again because with Primal Dice you're actually able to get it off, and like I said before with Blizzard, if you're able to drag a unit closer to your hero and then get the spell off, get it your entire army getting +1 damage when a lot of your units are damage 2 goes up to damage 3, changes the DPS of the army drastically. But when it comes to more reliable spells to cast, I like I like Vicious Stranglethorn's War because making sure a unit can't pile in is always really effective. That's how Nurgle and other armies do really well. And then I also really like Vile Tide, just being able to make a unit take D3 more wounds and not be able to receive commands until the end of that turn. Make sure they can't all out defense and make sure they can't redeploy. And then, it makes it so yeah. So those are the 3 spells that I really like. The other spells are also they're good too, but they're more niche, and you have to assume that, for example, Primal Dominance, you're going against some monsters. If we go back to a monster meta, then I'll look at Primal Dominance. If Wild Rampage, I love that spell. The only problem is that some Beasts of Chaos units, they have things that they have their attacks or they have abilities that proc on 6s to hit. So then you have to choose between Wild Rampage or whatever those abilities are.
Yeah,
But if you
yeah.
take mostly let's say Zangors or Bestigors, then that's why you would take that spell. And then if you like taking monster heavy stuff like Gorgons, then you would take Titanic Fury.
Yeah, I don't mind Titanic Fury if you're trying to get the most out of, let's say, a Gorgon. Maybe you want to Hull Frosted as well, but yeah, I would probably agree with you. Like Vile Tide, Tendrils. I do like Primal Dominance, but the meta isn't at that point yet where monsters are dominating again. If Suns start dominating again, now they've got the armies of renown, and who knows when Beast Core Raiders of the Ogres kind of, if they get some boosts, who knows? Maybe Primal Dominance might be worth it again, but you're right, probably not high priority right now.
Yeah, but I mean, objectively, even I know we had a big discussion about the Shaggoth. all the spells are really effective and like they're strong objectively. What I like about them, especially though, is that they're situational. There's no auto include spells. There's no spells you just don't look at all. They're all like situational, and I think that's why I think Games Workshop did a really good job of making not only the war scrolls but the spells um, really diverse. So you can just take them whenever there's a meta change or you want to try things. So props to them.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. You've got tools to respond. Do you have a favorite artifact at all? Without going into all of them, I think we can I think it's very clear. Like there's one or two probably clear winners.
I think for me, there's two clear ones, or no, three actually. So I think the best one is Brave Blast Trumpet, obviously, because you get to summon a unit of Ungor Raiders, Ungors, or Gors. Gors, when they charge, if they outnumber the unit that they're charging, they make them fight last on a 3-up. Ungors, they can retreat instead of fight, so it allows you to do move shenanigans. And Ungor Raiders, it gives you more shooting and more board presence just to be around the objective and score. This is definitely the strongest, and I think what makes it strong too is that even if you roll a 1 on the summon, they come at the end of the next move phase. It's not that if you roll a 1, it just doesn't happen. They come later, but generally, you always want to take this artifact because we're a semi-elite army now, we want as many bodies as we can on the board. And then the other two artifacts I really like, it's kind of a toss-up between those two. They're not like there's not one is not strictly better than the other. It just depends on what you can fit. If you take a Warlord Battalion, Slitherrack Helm. So the synergy I really like about this is if you charge, if a hero charges on a 2-up, you make them fight last. So let's say if you have a Doom Bull. The Doom Bull can make anyone with the Bulgor keyword, which is himself, Bulgors, Cygors, and Gorgons, charge at the start of every combat phase, including your opponents. So let's say you charge Bulgors in, and then they're about to get charged. If your hero is nearby, he can give himself the command ability to countercharge. So he can essentially countercharge into a unit that charged a BOC unit and make the fight last on a 2-up. And suddenly that BOC unit is protected and they're able to kill the unit that charged them. So it gives a lot of like protection in combat, and it makes your opponents think twice about charging. So that's what I really like about that. It's really great tech. And then Bleeding Gnarlstaff I really like too, because let's say on some tables the objectives or terrain pieces are like large. So I like putting this on a Zangor Shaman who flies around 16, and he could still do this ability even if he runs. So let's say if he runs, he moves 16 to any terrain piece or objective on a 2-up. Every enemy unit takes D3 mortal wounds because the effect does not affect Beast of Chaos units. So it's a way to generate a lot of like mortal wounds in the army outside of like spell casting and Bulgor mortal wounds.
What about with the height of like at the moment? We've got a lot of death on doing really well, especially OBR and Soulblight, and who knows what's happening with Feck. Do you see value in the Axe of Morgor?
No, because it's not. So the real problem is that like it only war rolls are not affected or cannot be made by weapons from that hero. It's not like the Corn one where it just turns off ward saves within 3 of the bearer. It only turns off ward saves if the hero makes attacks into the unit. And generally, our heroes, like for let's say the Doom Bull, he only has 3 attacks, like on 3s and 3s, so not like especially powerful. And then the Beast Lord only has like 5 attacks. Still a good profile for a foot hero, but the fact that it doesn't turn off ward saves just within 3 of that hero, and it only turns off ward saves within the attacker, to me, it has way less value than doing potentially D3 mortal wounds to within 6-inch radius, or Brave Blast Trumpet, where you summon a unit, or you fight last, where you're able to create multiple combats where they can't touch your low save units. So that's my thoughts on that artifact.
Yeah, and look, Bray Blast Trumpet is probably my favorite, being able to bring on a bunch of troops, especially since you can't summon them anymore. And it can just help you, especially in the later game or even in the early game. There's a lot of utility in that, which I dig. And as I already alluded to with spells, I don't know if taking an extra artifact right now is the best choice. I do prefer to take the extra spell and dip into both the lore of the Generals Handbook as well as my own army's lore. So Second artifact isn't always the right choice, but I also do like the Slither Helm rack being able to Slither rack helm being able to do the strike last. So I would agree there.
Yeah, I mean, generally, I like to. It's a toss up between if you want the extra artifact or you knowing an extra spell. Like both are good for Beast of Chaos lists.
I guess the question is you don't have a lot of double casters, right? So it's
Yeah.
more about the utility as opposed to being able to maximize all of the spells in your selection.
Yeah.
What are these Grey Phrase? Are there some that are better than others right now, or do you find that All Herd is just too good? Or like, like what are you thinking about when you look at the Great Phrase?
So it's funny. I remember when I first looked at the book, I thought All Herd was the obvious contender of being the strongest because being able to bring back D3+3 lets you play like a Horde army again. Like, for example, let's say if you play All Herd, you take a unit of Gores with shields. So they're a 4-up. So if you take shields, they go from a 5-up base save to a 4-up base save. So if you all defense them, they could be a 3-up save on all defense. And if you take a big block of them, not only do they base rally on 5-up, they have a 5-up rally on their musician or banner bearer. They can return D3+3 at the end of every battle shock phase. So it lets you have a lot of resiliency when the army doesn't let you have it. But because I've played a lot of games with the army at this point, I actually like Dark Walkers the most because being able to teleport a unit, even after you bring your entire army on ambush, being able to teleport a chaff unit of Ungors, Gores, or Raiders anywhere on the board lets you threaten objectives. It lets you play for the board, and it lets you play for battle tactics like Surround and Destroy and other things. And a thing with Dark Walkers is that when you get the +1 to charge when you come out of ambush or you do a setup. So let's say I want to charge a unit of, let's say I need a unit of Gores to be somewhere to make something fight last. So I teleport a unit of Gores, so then they get a +1 to charge. So now they just need an 8-inch charge. And I believe, from what I remember, they have a +1 to charge on their War Scroll. So they actually need only a 7-inch charge to make something fight last.
Spicy.
So like it's a lot of like good tech. And then being able to teleport a shooting unit of Ungor Raiders lets you like threaten like foot heroes to take screens. So to me, Dark Walker stands out as the king because right now it lets you play for battle tactics easier when we look at these Chaos battle tactics and the GHB tactics, where you don't have to kill your units to win.
I was going to say this plays into the battle tactics really nicely. Yeah, you could build around All Herd and have these like, just not undieable, but certainly units that just keep regenerating and you got extra bodies on the board. But for me, the utility of moving around the board through Dark Walkers because you have no natural teleports is a great little rule. I gotta ask you though, Gave Spawn. So we talked Quake Fray, and Quake Fray is very obvious. Cygors become priests. Priests know an extra spell, prayer. The prayer is Earth Shatterer that does a bunch of mortal wounds around an objective. It's neat. It might be interesting ability for the current Magic meta, but they're obvious what you're building around.
It also makes the Cygors and it makes Gorgon's battle line. So you don't have to invest in like taking Ungor's like, battle line, which lets you have more options, and we have a Quake Fray list and can't wait to go into that later. But
right, let me move to Gave Spawn. I was trying to just acknowledge Quake Fray for a second. I'm trying to steer us.
I got excited, but let's go to Gave Spawn.
Steer to Gave Spawn. So Gave Spawn allows you to have this interesting unit of 3 Chaos Spawns, which is called the Gibbering Congregation. Do you see much play in this? Like, obviously, that would take up your 3 battle line choices. So knock that out of the park. Battle line's now handled by 3 Chaos Spawns.
I really like Gave Spawn because of the fact that when you take a unit of Gibbering Congregation, if you just take that unit of 3 spawn, that's not only does it, like you said, fill your battle line requirements, each spawn is an MSU unit in addition. So the way you play Gave Spawn is that you want to take a bunch of, so even though, like I said earlier, Beasts of Chaos generally don't like to trade. However, Gave Spawn lets you take enough like cheap units to be able to trade units, because if you look at the base War Scroll of a Morgurite Chaos Spawn, that's a part of the Gibbering Congregation, it has D6 shots, 3s and 3s, rend 1, 2 damage each. So if you take several of those units, they actually have a lot of shooting. And not in addition, when they're in combat, if they're within 1 inch of an enemy unit, they reduce attacks by 1. This doesn't have a limit. So if you're able to dogpile like 2 or 3 chaos spawn or even 4 chaos spawn onto a hammer unit that has a lot of attacks, you reduce all their attacks to 1. And then if they're stuck fighting chaos spawn, they're forced to split their attacks between chaos spawn, and that reduces the output of the unit immensely. And then because they're all MSU, it also lets you play for surround and destroy easily, intimidate the invaders, and other like Beast of Chaos like battle tactics. And you don't have to spam spawn entirely. You can take enough spawn where you're able to take other like hammer units without investing into like Ungors or Ungor Raiders and other things. It definitely revolves around a debuffing playstyle. I liked it a lot more before Soulblight, Seraphon, and other army books came out, where they're able to do AoE mortal wounds, or like let's say Khorne. I don't like playing this against Khorne because each dead spawn is just free blood tide. So I think right now the meta isn't friendly to Gave Spawn, but it's definitely when the book first came out, when the meta was more friendly to Gave Spawn, it has a lot of play, and I actually like playing Gave Spawn into the Beast of Chaos bearer because Beast of Chaos hate debuffs, and that's what Gave Spawn is reliant around.
I also really like the run and charge mechanic under it, and the spawn is much more consistent than the regular spawn. So if you look at the regular spawn and go, it's all right. When you look at the Gave spawn, it is much more consistent as a profile, and it has some extra rules, as you've said. I don't mind it.
Yeah, they move 10 inches. So also to introduce some synergies, if you take the Slake Fray command trait, they get to move 13 inches. So potentially they move 13 inches and they have an 8-inch shooting range. So they essentially have a 21-inch threat range, which makes them really effective and a really solid trading phase.
And they can run and charge. They can't run and shoot, but they can run and charge. So some nice little spicy meatballs.
Yeah, I think right now the nice thing about the army or that sub-faction is, even though the meta isn't friendly to them now, at some point the meta will become friendly to them, and then Gave Spawn will come back. So
it's a very easy unit to build around, and as we've said as well, it unlocks a lot of your points in other areas. So I do like that ability of the Gave Spawn as well, but I'd probably tend to agree Darkwalkers would probably be my favorite choice at the moment, especially with the battle tactics as a selection.
Yeah.
Are you a fan of Antorian Acolytes or the Wizard Finders of Antor?
Because, like I mentioned earlier, we like to have our heroes off board. I sadly don't like the battalion as much in Beast of Chaos, but if you build your heroes being on the board, like let's say in a Gave Spawn list, where in Gave Spawn, you'd like to actually have most of your army on the board, then you would take this battalion, for example. But I guess the other problem with this battalion is it generally competes with the Warlord Battalion, which I really like in Beast of Chaos.
I was going to ask you why, but I'll just save it to your list, I think. I think the Antorian Acolytes is a very easy battalion for you to fill. So if you wanted 2 Great Bray Shamans in there or 3, that would allow you to do a bunch of cool things. But your trade-off is you want them on the table, or you're really only going to benefit from this from turn 3 onwards.
Yeah.
Which still might be enough for you, like, being able to really have it in that critical round and beyond. And they haven't taken damage because they've been off the board potentially for turn 1, turn 2, could actually really work in your favor.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. I think you essentially have to decide if you want Warlord Battalion or Andorian Acolytes. So that's just kind of a decision that comes down to for you Beast of Chaos players out there.
You can't do both? Like, why couldn't you do both?
I think the problem is that you just have to invest too many points into heroes when it's more important to invest, in my opinion, more into units. In my opinion, you want at least 2 or 3 heroes. That's it, and then you take the rest as hammers, because the heroes in Beast of Chaos are all support pieces. Even the Doom Bull, who looks like a combat hero, he's not actually a combat hero. He's more of a support piece, if anything.
Right, so your methodology is your methodology is the less points in heroes the better, because that enables you to have more troops on the board, and that's really where you're projecting your power.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you picking grand strategies from your battle tome, or do you like things like spellcasting savant or slaughter of sorcery.
So the grand strategy that reigns supreme to me here is desecrating Brayherd. When you complete this grand strategy, if you have 2 or more objectives, and if the objectives are contested by any friendly Brayherd units. So most of your army has the Brayherd keyword outside of Bulgors, Cygors, Gorgons, and then Dragon Ogres. So this is so grand strategies have become a lot harder in this GHB, and especially a lot of armies are trying to figure out which grand strategy to take. And I feel like out of all the grand strategies, desecrating Brayherd is generally pretty reliable to get, especially because of, like, let's say you're playing Dark Walkers or All Herd, where you're like, at least you have enough chap units on the board, or your heroes. So Shamans have the Brayherd keyword. So as long as you control 2 objectives and you have, like, let's say even a small foot hero or a unit of chaff on it, there's a high chance you'll get this grand strategy. In my personal experience, I've been able to get this grand strategy most of the time. It's proven to me to be the most reliable grand strategy out of all the grand strategies out there. Because if I have to look at spellcasting Savant, I do like spellcasting Savant, but with how squishy our army is, so this makes sense. We don't want our units to die, but if a unit is about to die, we want to be able to make sure that it dies with a purpose. Even our heroes, like if a hero or a unit did its job, then you're happy. You don't want to have a grand strategy where you cannot afford to sacrifice your hero when you need it to happen. So that's why I like desecrating Brayherd, because as long it lets me be uncommittal, it lets me, I'm not forced table with the opponent. As long as I kill enough and just play enough for the objectives, I'll be able to have this grand strategy on lockdown.
With the rise of Seraphon right now, and being able to just do mortal wounds across the board, spellcasting Savant really is a risky play if you're taking it to a tournament, because if you come to that matchup, it's very easy to pick off your Wizard General, who's an Entorian Locust, so less than 10 wounds, and just chip away and it'll die.
Yeah. We also don't have any bodyguard mechanics, so it's unfortunate that, if you lose also when you're cutting yourself D3, there's a chance you could kill your own hero by doing that, and you could deny yourself a grand strategy.
Would you use Protect the Herdstone? That seems like an interesting one as well.
If so many armies weren't able to just teleport to it or get within quick enough, I would value it more, because I really valued it last book, where I think the only thing about the grand strategy was they just had to not smash the Herdstone. But now, because it's if you just end within 9 inches of it, it's easier to deny, and I don't like them having to have a chance to deny my. I don't like. I guess what I say is I don't. So Beast of Chaos Army likes to play around the board. Sorry, I was mumbling my words. We like to be spread out around the board. We don't like sitting by something to protect it. That's not how our army plays. We're not a uniform army defending like a castle or something. We're animals. We're around. We just want to be in our own territory. We don't want to be protecting something, because it's anti-synergistic with how we want to play our battle tactics and our game plan. So that's kind of my take on that grand strategy.
I feel the same way with my Protect the Loon Shrine. I don't like the idea of having to protect it, and I don't have that many abilities to project power. Like, I don't have long strikes in Git, so I feel the exact same way with Protect the Herdstone. Yeah. Seems like a good idea, but I don't want to be castling up protecting. In the old book where you were summoning from it and you wanted to protect it, and you probably had a lot more of the rend power, yeah. But otherwise, at the moment, I think desecrating Brayherd is probably the nicer one.
Yeah, and now the Herdstone, it only gives the extra rend. It doesn't give the 4-up rally or anything anymore. And the rend is just battlefield wide. So most of the time, I honestly just stick it in the corner and just let it do its thing. But if I know that they don't have a monster, I like putting the Herdstone near an objective, because there is a battle tactic where I just have to kill something within 12 of the Herdstone. So, it's just something to play around for deployment.
Do you find there are particular battle tactics that you use more than others? Again, situation, matchup, battle plan, yada, yada, yada. But are there ones that you will, especially turn 1, right? Turn 1 is the one that has gotten a lot harder since in this particular season.
So I think the ones I generally like to do turn one are magical dominance because let's say they're not in range, I just get the spell off. I don't have to interact with the opponents. Cool. The other one I also like to get is reduce the savagery because let's say I pick a chaff unit, I make my hero take D3, they take D6 mortal wounds, and then because I can do my ritual start of the hero phase, I can see how many mortal wounds a enemy unit take before I pick reduce savagery. Because if I pick this tactic, I have to make sure that whoever is the target of a ritual ruin is dead by the end of turn. So if I do enough mortal wounds to like a chaff unit or a hero, then I can have Ungor Raiders shoot at the start of the hero phase turn one to make sure I get that tactic easily. And then it just allows me to be in a better position to not overcommit myself to get tactics. Another one I also potentially like to do turn one, kind of situational, is intimidate the invaders or aid of the wilderness, because like if you notice a theme with a lot of these tactics, outside of trample to mulch and reduces savagery, we actually don't have to kill things to um, win the game, especially with the GHB tactics.
And of the GHB ones, are there ones that you use often? Is it like, bait and trap, lead into the maelstroms, surround and destroy, and obviously intimidate? Are they the traditional ones that you kind of rotate through?
My go-tos are surround and destroy because let's say if I'm playing Darkwalkers, I can just teleport a unit to that board edge and guarantee the tactic. And when we come out of ambush, we're wholly within 9 of the board edge anyway. So like let's say um I get the double from 2 to 3 or whatever, and my unit's already out of ambush. I just pick 3 units already by the board edge and I get my tactic. Magical dominance, like we said before, I like doing that a lot. Let into the maelstrom, I like doing it with like a chaff unit or a hero if I'm charging something weaker than those things. And intimidate the invaders is generally easy to get because let's say if I'm coming out of ambush, then I can just come outside my territory and then just get my tactic. So yeah.
No, I like it. Obviously, again, situation and things decided, but again, you want to be in combat, right? So bait and trap, great one. You've got a lot of movement. So between the General's Handbook and the Battletome, you've got plenty to choose from. I feel like there's a lot for you to choose from here.
Yes, I think that's what makes Beast of Chaos have the flexibility to do well at events right now, despite our balanced win rate, because we're able to score. We were able to essentially have enough tactics where I'm not exactly worried about running out of battle tactics. I always know that I have something I can score, and that's what makes the RB really reliable. Because like I think most games I actually get 5 tactics most of the time, maybe at most like if I'm dropping some tactics 4. So
Yeah.
really important for like let's say in some packs like Old Town Throwdown pack or differential where scoring is like especially secondary objectives is important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're really thinking about the list build and how you can get those 5 out of 5 if you want to do it well in a tournament, and also having a lot of choices, right? You don't have to kill something, and as you said, there's so much that you can do without interacting with the enemy. That gives Beast of Chaos a lot of flexibility at tournaments.
Yeah. Like I said, with Beast of Chaos, you generally don't need a table to win. You just need to kill enough while you score, I think.
So we've got a couple of lists to go through. I'd love to hear from you just some of the combinations and why you built the list or how it kind of works. So I'll go through the first one. It's a Dark Walkers list with Desecrating Bray Herd, and the Triumph is Bloodthirsty. You've got a Doom Bull, who's the general with Bestial Cunning. You've got a Beast of Chaos Zangor Shaman with the Bleating Gnarl Staff and the Merciless Blizzard. We've got ourselves the Great Bray Shaman with the Bray Blast Trumpet and Rupture. Is that correct?
No, it's supposed to be Blizzard as well.
I'm like, what?
Yeah, I accidentally sent you the wrong output. It should be
Blizzard.
Yeah, I obviously when you sent me the slides, you asked me if everything was right. No, it's supposed to be
All right,
Blizzard.
so we've got double Blizzard here. All right, cool. I'm
Yeah,
like, maybe
thankfully we can edit this before the video comes out.
No, I'm keeping it there. So you've got 9 Bulgors, you've got 10 Ungors, 10 Ungor Raiders, 10 Ungor Raiders, 10 Ungor Raiders, 6 Beasts of Chaos, Zangor Enlighten, 6 Beasts of Chaos, Zangor Enlighten, and 3 Zangor Fiend Bloods.
Yeah, so this is the list I have. It's taken me a while to like build up to this point, but this list has been the one that's proven to be the most. It's gotten me the most results. Gotten me several 4-1s at this point this season, and it got me the 6-2 record at Nova. So it's been tried and proven. So yeah. So what I like about this list is that all my artifacts and command traits are spread out across my 3 heroes. So even if let's say I lose one of my heroes, I didn't lose I haven't lost a lot of enhancements on the hero. So Doom Bull he's just there to have bestial cunning to make my 9 Bulgors generally come outside of 7 inches anywhere on the board. And that's 630 points of just beef and just pure damage. I think 9 Bulgors actually does the most damage in this entire game because there are 4 attacks each with paired axes, and then 6 to hit, do 2 more wounds each on all of their weapon profiles. So yeah, so that's why I think best of cutting with the Bulgors. They're able to threaten anywhere on the battlefield. And Doom Bull can make them so when Bulgors charge 9 Bulls, I can potentially roll 9 mortal wounds on the impact hits, and then they can charge again into something that's juicy and do 9 mortal wounds. They're pretty much there to just warp the entire game around them and make my opponents have to overly worry about them because they do have the capability of just destroying an entire army on a double. And then Zangor Shaman, Bray Shaman, I like both of them to have blizzards because again, when we were talking about blizzard, they're cheap. They become cheap trading pieces where if they have to die, they die with a purpose, or I'm able to zone off opponents off of objectives or units with a potential blizzard. And then Bleeding Gnarl Staff on my Zangor Shaman lets me fly around on my 16-inch or potentially if I roll a 22-inch moving disc boy just to do a bunch of more wounds to enemy units with the Bleeding Gnarl Staff. And then Brave Blast Trumpet lets me summon another chaff unit. And then I have 1 unit of Ungors because usually I have that unit on the board just to be able to get tactics and hold 1, hold 2. And then I have 3 units of Ungor Raiders because between all those 3 units of Ungor Raiders, that they have 21 shots each, so that'll be 63 shots, 4s and 4s, no rend, 1 damage. So that allows me to at least remove a chaff unit at the start of the movement phase, or lets me pepper something that if let's say a hero, if they didn't screen into it. So yeah, 4s and 4s is the most reliable profile, but it lets me for every save that it could spike, and for every save that they don't make, it's just a lot of 1 damage shots. And when they come off the board, they can just especially in Dark Walkers, Ungors and Ungor Raiders can just teleport around just to keep scoring objectives or keep shooting vulnerable units. So that's why I like them a lot. And they also operate as screens. And then I have 2 units of 6 Zangor Lion, because the special thing about Zangor Lion is that they stop command abilities in the combat phase within 3 inches. So there's no all-out defense. They can't all-attack. So they're a very punchy unit for being 180 points because they're 3 attacks each. The leader has 4 attacks each. So you have 19 attacks, 4s and 3s, rend 2 damage each. However, if they go second in the battle round, if Beast of Chaos goes second in the battle round, they go to wounding on 2s. So if you do all attack, 3s and 2s, rend 2, or if you get to turn 4, where you go up another rend 3 damage each. It allows them to be a trading piece at 180 units, and allows me to have a secondary threat after the Bulgors charged, and maybe the Bulgors did their job, but they died, doing their job. So it allows me to have some units spread over the board, and then they are also they have the Bray Herd keyword for my grand strategy of desecrating Bray Herd. So most units in my list outside the Doom Bull and the Bulgors have that keyword. And Slongors, I like them because they're another they're another cheap hammer unit I can trade, and they're good at clearing screens if the Ungor Raiders didn't finish the job. So yeah, this list just not only can I play this list offensively, I can also pull the trigger when I need to, and it plays for tactics well with how much mobility I have with the list, and it has enough damage, and it has enough, let's say even if I lose a Bulgor, it has enough staying power to help me play for 5 turns.
Love it.
Yeah. Yeah, but like I said, remember everybody, the Rupture is not Rupture, it's Blizzard.
All right. All right, so we're back from a tiny little bathroom water break, and we got 2 remaining lists to kind of go through. The next one is a Quake Fray list, desecrating Bray herd again. Bloodthirsty Triumph again is the Triumph. You have a Doom Bull with the Bestial Cunning, Bray Blast Trumpet. You've got yourself a Beast of Chaos, Sangor Shaman, again with the Bleeding Null Staff and Hoarfrost now. You got yourself a Great Bray Shaman with the Vicious Strangle Thorns. 6 Bulgor with the pair of axes, 10 Ungor, a Gorgon, the Quake Fray Cygor, 2 Cockatrice, 2 units of 6 Zangor Enlightened, and the Doom Blast Dirigible Horn. So this is 1980. By the way, this and the last list also had Warlord and gained an extra artifact. So both of them were around over 10 drops, so we haven't reduced the drops. Does this one differ to the last list we just spoke about?
So this list so Darkwalkers likes to play around the board. So that's how my list that I played is built around. And also because of 9 Bulgors, I have that unit because it was really good into like hammers or tanks like OBR. This list relies on being a debuffing castle army that likes to trade, because there's so many debuffing tools in this list. Because, for example, Quake Fray or Cygor, it can do D3 mortal wounds if there's enemy units on jet, because it halves them. And then Doomblast Dirtshorn, that endless spell. So if the spell goes off, within 6 inches of it, enemy units are -1 to wound, and the aura of it goes up 6 inches every battle round. So when I was helping Brian Cox make this list, because this is his list and he's done very well with it with several 4-1s. Essentially, what he likes to do is that he likes to hide it behind a terrain piece, because you need line of sight to unbind endless spells. So if you don't have line of sight to unbind the endless spell, eventually throughout the game, it just becomes this massive aura of like -1 to wound, which helps Beast of Chaos, or this list specifically, be more durable than most Beast of Chaos lists. And then if you combine that with Cockatrices, where on a 4-up, you just only hit on 6s. So imagine where, like, let's say you're fighting this army where you're only hitting on 6s. If the 4-up goes off, you're -1 to wound, and then it becomes really hard to kill these Beasts of Chaos units that usually generally have like a 4 or 5-up save. And then Gorgon is there because he's consistent at not only being able to buff himself up with extra rend, he's great at fighting horde units like zombies, because when he fights certain units, or when he fights units, he's able to roll a dice and he can eat models to heal them. And then he has a monstrous action where if he kills at least a model, he heals 3 wounds. So with the Cockatrice and -1 wound, he's able to survive with being 16 wounds on a 5-up save that keeps healing. So he's really hard to deal with. And then in addition, Zangor and Lighten provided their debuff of no CP within 3 inches in the combat phase. And then you have the Bray Shaman that has Vicious Strangle Thorns that makes it so you can't pile in. And then Zangor Shaman, in addition, has Bleeding Gnarl Staff for AoE mortal wounds. And then so there's so much layers to this list that makes it different from the Darkwalkers list we were looking at, because this army actually wants to play close together. It wants to play like it actually wants to like play in a castle, which is weird for the Beast of Chaos list, but it works in the context of how many debuffs and like durability that this list, like, on paper it doesn't look that durable, but when you play against it or you play as it, you just have so many tools where like you can afford to play a Beast of Chaos army that's actually on the board rather than being off board. So the only unit that you actually need to put off the board is the 6 Bulgors, which is nice. And then with Hoarfrost, because most of the units this army does hit on 4s, if you can make Zangor Lightened or Gorgon hit on 2s, they just become world beaters. So yeah, that's why I wanted to share this list with everybody, because it's a different way of playing Beast of Chaos, where, like, let's say if someone's looking at Beast of Chaos results, all they see is Darkwalkers. No, this list has proven itself, and it introduces another like layer to the army, and it truly demonstrates that each sub faction allows you to build a different kind of Beast of Chaos list.
Yeah, I really like that. I like that the petrifying gaze from the cockatrice will make only unmodified sixes to hit, score a hit if it deals mortal wounds to them. I like the dirigible blast of the Doom Blast horn. And it's a really interesting pickup that you've talked about with the visible to them, right?
Yeah.
Probably not a lot of people think about that is when you try to dispel an endless spell, it has to be visible. So hiding something like this that has this aura of effect ability and hiding it from line of sight, great. Really,
Yeah.
really good call out.
Yeah, and I think so while there's only several hammers in the Dark Markets we were looking at, almost everything in this army outside of the Ungors and the heroes are a hammer. So he just has so many like threats, and even the cockatrices that being 120 points, their base attacks threes and threes, um, 2 damage each. So if they charge, they double their attacks. So not only are they a good debuffing piece, they can just go in there and just like fight, especially if something charges the cockatrice and you roll the 4 up.
Yeah, I dig it. I like it. I like that you've shown even some of the similar units from the last the last list, but in a very different play style to show that there are multiple ways to use it as opposed to just one Bulgors. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like you've got a
Yeah,
lot of variety here.
yeah. So like yeah, because the other Darkwalkers likes to rely on Bulgors. This list doesn't rely on the Bulgors. The Bulgors are they still have to worry about 6 Bulgors, but 6 Bulgors are not as expensive as 9 Bulgors. So while everything else is on the board, 6 Bulgors are more like a flanking unit in this list rather than being the primary like hammer or like the destroyer of everything.
Before I move into the last list, and that's the Michigan GT list, that's literally just finished up. I just want to ask you, Hoarfrost, where's Hoarfrost going? Is that going onto the Gorgon Cygor, or is that going into? Because the Cockatrice has some really nice abilities. When it charges, you get to double the attacks on the charge. Where's Hoarfrost going?
So because I played against the Brian Cox, who's like the one that I helped with this list,
Yeah,
he generally puts it on the Gorgon or Zangor Enlightened. But if the situation comes up, he can put it easily on the Cockatrice or like the Cygor, because let's say if you spike the roll, suddenly they can be Ren 3 or Ren 2. Like that's like a lot of like potential like damage that would otherwise not have gone through before. So yeah, so I
I
guess
like
that's why
that.
I like that debate we were having about like, oh, do you take Blizzard or do you take Hoarfrost? It really depends on what kind of Beast of Chaos list you're taking. There's no like right answer, which is why list building in this army is like, it's good. Like I like the options that we have.
And remind me again, this is Brian Cox's list that you helped write.
Yes. Yeah, so this is not my list, but this is one that we've experimented with because we
I'm
talked a
only
lot.
I'm only teasing you. You've mentioned it a few times. I'm just teasing.
Yeah.
The last list, and maybe you helped write this one as well, was Michael. Is it Roosh? Apologies if I'm
Michael
pronouncing.
Roush, and I didn't help him. I didn't help him with this list, but but we have like talked because we're both Team America Minutemen, so we like to like just express our ideas to each other, which is
So,
great.
so Michael's list, just coming off the back of a top 10 finish, if I remember correctly, of 4-1, was from Michigan GT. It is a Dark Walkers list, a Desecrating Bray Herd, Indomitable as the Triumph. You've got yourself a Zangor Shaman, which is the general with the Slack Fray Reveler command trait, the Knowing Eye artifact, the Merciless Blizzard spell. You got yourself a Bray Shaman with the Bray Blast Trumpet and Hoarfrost. You've got Grashrak. I'm glad to see Grashrak. It's such a great model. Grashrak has the Tendrils of Astrophy. You've also got yourself Be'lakor, the Dark Master, being an ally from Slaves to Darkness. 3 units of 10 Ungor, 2 units of 10 Chaos Zangor. You got yourself a unit of 6 Zangor Enlighten on disc, 3 Dragon Ogres, and you've got the Ravening Direflock. Obviously, Grashrak's despoilers come free with said Grashrak. So,
Yeah.
and this is Warlord and Vanguard. And I know this is not your list, but what are the insights that you would call out when you check out this list, and why do you think it went well at Michigan GT?
So even though I don't know how the meta of the Michigan area is because I play in the West Coast, this list is almost every so to shout everything in this list outside of Dragon Ogres and Be'lakor have the Bray Herd keyword. So obviously you can play around the Bray Herd, like your grand strategy, very easily, because you just have so many like different units to like, just be around the board with. And this list is also like similar to the other Quake Fairy list we were looking at, is that there's just a bunch of like individual trading pieces and like potential hammers. So I guess to shout out some things, Be'lakor is a really interesting addition to BOC. Be'lakor has started to show up in a lot of Beasts of Chaos lists that have been doing well, especially at Nova and like events around the world, because BOC units don't like to get hit back. Be'lakor offers that like that protection, especially if um, it also prevents an opponent from making the most out of a double turn. Because if you have Be'lakor and you keep rolling the 3 up to like do Dark Master, sometimes you even want to give the double and he just like stops them. And even though he's not like a crazy combat like profile, like everyone knows that like he sucks in combat in everybody's experiences. His like Dark Master can be just like game winning, and he moves 14. He flies, and he's like just generally decent at like taking a flank on his own. And he's there to provide like roar if you need it, for example. And he has a -1 wound spell. So like just he's like I think our best ally choice out of all the other potential ally choices, even though we can only ally in Slaves of Darkness. So that's one thing to shout out with the list, and to shout out Grashrak. So Grashrak has a spell where within, I think, 12 or 18 inches of him, if it goes off on a 7, he can give the entire army +1 to hit against the unit. And not only does that affect Beast of Chaos units, it also affects ally units, because the wording is friendly units. So he's really effective for that, and he's actually also the only hero that has a bodyguard. So he can also, if he's doing 3 mortals to himself, he can pass it off to the bodyguard unit. But if he doesn't do that, having Grashrax Despoilers, like his warband that follows him around, allows him to have like another piece on the board that just runs around and scores points. Zangors are different from Zangor Enlightened in that they're on 32s like Gores. So even though they sadly GB isn't a thing, what makes them really effective is that they're one of the few Beasts of Chaos units in the army that has that base hits on 3s. So they have 3 attacks each, hit on 3s, wound on 3s, no rend, 1 damage. So if you're able to honeycomb it right, you could have a lot of like potentially about 20 or more attacks into like a unit with 3s and 3s, no rend, 1 damage, but with Hearthstone, rend 1 damage. Or if you get Horror Frost off, suddenly you have like 20 attacks potentially like with all attack 2s and 3s, rend 3, 1 damage each. It just allows them to clear screens and be a trading piece in the army. And then it's like you don't have to like in the 2 lists that we're looking at now with Quake Freight and then this Dark Walkers list that did well, they're not relying on Ungor Raiders to clear screens, which is what it's how I like to play Beasts of Chaos. But we're showcasing these lists to demonstrate that you don't need to always take Ungor Raiders or Bulgors in your list, as you can see with the diversity of these Beasts of Chaos lists. And then he's taking Zangor Enlightened on disc. So while they're just as expensive as Bulgors and they don't do mortal wounds like Bulgors, they have the same thing where they stop CP within 3 inches. Except in this list, they also move, instead of moving 6 inches on foot, they move 16 inches, or with the Slake Fray Reveler command trait, they move 19 inches anywhere on the board. It just allows them to just be this mobile threat that can get to anywhere and dictate combat when they want to. And then I think the reason why he also included, for example, Dragon Ogres in the list. So if you look at that War Scroll, they're actually they're also the other unit in the army that base hits on 3s. So they have innate red 1, so by the time it's turn 2, they can get up to red 2. So they're 5 attacks each with 3 models. So that's 15 attacks, 3s and 3s, red 2, 2 damage each. And their special thing is that if they charge, any hit roll of 6 gets the Night Haunt rule of it just becomes like an auto wound or whatever the wording is. So they don't have to roll the wound roll if they roll a hit roll of 6. And then in addition, they also heal on a 2-up D3, and they do damage within 3 of an enemy unit on a 2-up D3. So yeah, there's just a lot of this list likes to play all around the board, and he has 3 units of Ungors because he likes to take advantage of the fact that if he takes multiple combats, they can retreat instead of fight. So he likes to make opponents have to force to think about, okay, If I let this Ungor unit retreat, then they might take this objective from me, or they might deny me a battle tactic, or I have a swing of the Harriman unit. So it gives his opponents more choices than he than they like to have to be forced to make, if that makes sense.
Couple of quick call-outs before you tell me about the Ravening Direflock. The Grashrak spell is 18, which is really neat. You also have one maybe extra ability we didn't talk about, which was the extending of the Rituals of Ruin by 6 inches, which I think is really, really neat, especially with the is it the Blood Hunt, the get over here. And then also as you said, the Dragon Ogres, when they make the charge move, hits of a 6, an unmodified 6, will just automatically wound, so they just go straight to a save roll. So
yeah,
but you don't get the consistency of a Bulgor charge, especially when you're combining it with the Doom Bull. But they have a lot more wounds, if I remember correctly. They have they're five wounds each. I remember that, but they're
yeah. Dragon Ogres are 5 wounds each. Yep.
So they'll count as 2 on an objective as well, which is neat.
Yeah, and I guess they're even they're enough of a threat where you have to worry about them, where you can't just let them run rampant in your lines.
I'll tell you what, though, I really like the Ravening Direflock. I think it's got some fascinating rules when you look at the fact that it can shut down Rally and Inspiring Presence within 6 inches, although it's a short range. So, but the other one, which is the interrupting of the command, so being able to stop issuing and receiving. If anyone's played OBR and how annoying they can be with some of the command point stuff, being able to intercept or interrupt a command being issued or received. Does this number does it increase or always just 6? It's always just 6. It doesn't expand at all.
Yeah, it's just within 6. It's not like Doom Blaster Charge. So yeah, I was gonna shout out that endless spell. That endless spell is really effective, and it's you can almost argue maybe undercosted for the utility that it provides. It not only does one thing, it does 2 things. Stopping Rally or Inspiring Presence is big because you want units to just die and run away, and then potentially stopping a command port or stealing a CP is just it's another way that it protects BOC units from being hurt. It just adds another layer of protection, just like how Bellacor's Dark Master ability works in this list. And then also his spell choice is also it's with Tendrils of Atrophy, because I know we were talking about spells earlier. Giving a unit of Zangors or Dragon Ogres or so if Tendrils of Atrophy goes off, it gives Zangors damage 1 to damage 2. For Zangor Light, it makes their damage from damage 2 to damage 3, and then Dragon Ogres damage 2 to damage 3. And it also, I believe, that spell doesn't say just Beast of Chaos units, so it can actually make Bellacor's sword to 3 damage potentially if that spell goes off. Maybe wrong about that, but
one second. I'm gonna go check the tapes. One sec.
Yeah.
Well, actually, just go straight here. Go to spells. Spell log, Tendril of Atrophy. Pick one enemy unit. You say Tendrils, right?
Yeah, Tendrils of Atrophy. +1 damage by each.
Okay, so it does. Because you're picking the enemy unit, you're not picking the friendly unit. You're picking the enemy. So
yeah. Okay, sweet. So I thought it possibly only applied to Beast of Chaos units that benefit from it. But yeah, Be'lakor could benefit from it. The range is limiting, but if you think your hero is going to get charged, or they charge a screen, or you just pull the enemy unit into the hero with the Blood Taunt, then you're able to get the spell off. And then the artifact, Knowing Eye, that one's interesting. I've looked at it, and I'm not the biggest fan of its use, but he obviously made it work in this list because with how the Knowing Eye works, if you take first, I believe I know it's either first or second, you get to move 6 inches. It depends on who takes a turn.
If you take the first turn in the current battle round, after players receive their starting command point, you receive 1 command point that can only be spent during the turn to allow the bearer to issue a command. If you take second in the current battle round, after players receive their starting command point, the bearer can make a normal move of up to 6 inches.
Yeah. So yeah, no, it's definitely it's techy, and it's definitely helps players make decisions. Maybe you could deny tactics, maybe you can get units on the Shaman objectives, And while all three lists did have some common things, like let's say Zangor Shaman and Bray Shaman, um, the nice thing though is that like all the three lists we looked at demonstrate how you can tailor the army around your play style. There's no one way to play the army, and I encourage people with who play Beast of Chaos to not just like look at like a top list, because I think for some people, especially with how Beast of Chaos works, it's not a straightforward army. So if you try to pick up a list that does well, maybe you have a different play style than the player that did well with it. You just mainly won't do well with it. So that's why I encourage you to experiment and just play around with it. Because for example, I didn't think that Zangors were like that effective until Michael Roush proved me wrong. So I was like, okay, maybe there's some ideas to think about. Or like the Quake Fray list, I didn't understand it at first when I was like helping to like write that help with Brian Cox's list, but then he's made it work, and I'm like, okay, there's like different ways to play the army outside of just like ambushing and charging. So like because the beauty of our book is that every war scroll and spell is like written effectively. You're able to tailor um, any list to your play style and sub faction. I will say probably the weakest sub faction to me right now is All Herd because of the loss of GB, but maybe someone will prove me wrong and make Quake Fray or not Quake Fray, All Herd work.
Awkward.
Yeah.
So I've got probably two final questions for you, and then I will go to work. First one is we haven't quite talked yet about the meta. So if I was going to go to a tournament with my Beast of Chaos, how do you think about, or whether it is at list construction, whether it is playing him on the table, how are you playing against the top table armies? So in any combination, whether it be Seraphon, OBR, Soulblight, Khorne, Slanesh. Any thoughts for me as a Beast of Chaos player responding to these armies?
So against those armies, you really have to play around the fact that like compared to most of those armies, you actually have you have 5 reliable battle tactics that you can pull from, even more than 5 battle tactics, and you have a semi-reliable grand strat compared to those armies. That is your biggest advantage against in those matchups. And even though statistically and like on the board, our army is like maybe not as like effective as OBR, for example, there are ways you can play around those top armies by I think it depends. I think if you go to like a big event, you want to be able to make a list that can handle not all of the top meta matchups, but at the most as much as you can. So for example, that's why I like taking 9 Bulgors, because because OBR units, for example, are hard to kill, or like let's say even Slanesh with their like debuffs or everything, 9 Bulgors just make sure that something's dead most of the time and it warps the game around them. Or like Seraphon, where like I just need to be able to punch through their screens and double charge right into their slams. So that's how I like to play Beast of Chaos, and that's generally my answers to it. I think you have to, against those top armies, you have to think about how you don't have to think about tabling those armies. You have to think about knocking out enough of their hammers where they cannot threaten you for the rest of the game. If you're able to just kill enough of their threats where you can just score for the rest of the game because you have easy tactics and book and GHB tactics where you just don't have to engage to score, then you can just win the game by maneuvering. We are the masters of being able to dictate the battlefield and being able to maneuver around your opponents. And I think GW did a really good job at emphasizing that as the theme of our army. And you should take advantage of that as a general and pilot it in a way where like you're able to maximize the most, to get victories and wins, and you'll have a good time with it. I will say though that because Beast of Chaos is a complicated army to play, I recommend if someone wants to do well at an event with them, you need practice against the top armies with Beast of Chaos to be able to understand how to beat them. And even then, because those armies are stronger, or maybe they have recursion, or they have just tools to be able to not be impacted by Beast of Chaos like tricks, you just have to be able to just understand the matchups and then just try to make the most out of it, because even despite this whatever this gameplay I'm suggesting to you guys, nothing's a guarantee. Dice can roll a certain way, maybe people make mistakes, and then but yeah, I think you just always have to be conscious about the weaknesses of Beast of Chaos and the strength of the army, and you just try to play the best ability that you can be. So yeah,
It's
that's
really,
kind of my take.
yeah, it's interesting because, you know, I see a lot of people when they don't do well with a list, the first thing they want to do is gut the list. They want to make multiple wholesale changes. They want to pull things in that'll solve their problems. But actually, it's about understanding and often the micro decisions. And that's why exactly in this channel, we always talk about list last. It could have been easier if we just went, hey, Matt, what's your top list and how do I go 4-1 with Beast of Chaos? And here's the list and I take it and I'd be free. But actually it's all the decisions that happen throughout the game and
Yeah.
understanding which levers to pull at what time and who gives me more reliability than others and which are the combinations, and it's through that knowledge you get a much better understanding of what you can anticipate over the 3 hours as opposed to just this is the list and it gets changed or the meta responds. And it's really interesting as well because of the Dawnbringer series that the meta is constantly shifting.
Yeah.
How will Kharadron overlords and their gun hauler shenanigans impact the meta? What's going to happen if Gargants start hitting the table again? If they work out that grand strategy and how the terrain moving removing ability works, right? Like this, and who knows what Dawnbringers 3 is going to bring? And like, there's so much on the table. The meta is constantly moving, and it's great to hear that you've got the tools to respond and you
Yeah.
feel like you're in a good spot to be able to respond regardless of where the meta shifts.
Yeah, even though I think if I have some issues with the army, I wish some units like Bestigors, maybe Dragon Ogres and other things were like less expensive because I think I mean outside of like let's say Quick Fray and how Michael Rausch did his list, I feel like a lot of the results that Beast of Chaos players have put out is mainly contingent on Bulgors and Ungor Raiders because they synergize so well together. And that's just because those two units synergize with um how like our ambush mechanics and everything. And it would be nice to see those other options so we don't have to entirely play around those units because they've become predictable to people to an extent of like how they work. But because like you said, the meta always changes, Beast of Chaos have enough units and spells and grand strategies and what's it called, battle tactic to always adapt to the meta. I always feel like because of how this book is written, we will always be in the high 40s because we're able to just adapt to the general like lay of the meta, as you would put it.
Yeah, and you're less reliant on units. You're more reliant on a play style, and we've talked a lot about the ambushing mechanic. And you can dictate the terms of battle through being able to essentially keep your toys off the table for turn 1, turn 2. So
Yeah,
that control um, is huge. It's huge because some armies are really tough to shift across the board. Some armies struggle to score battle tactics or deny battle tactics. You got plenty of tools. You got tools in the toolbox. It's about using the right tool at the right time. And Beast of Chaos, as I mentioned, is a steep learning curve for that reason.
yeah. Steep learning curve, and there's no like one list to follow. It's not like, oh, it's like you're taking 200 zombies. Okay, the list writes itself.
Yeah.
Everyone, because every so the nice thing about this army is that they're for, let's say, if we think about like the Johnny, Timmy, and Spike archetypes of like how people like play styles. There's ways there's a sub faction or there's a list for all those types of players. Let's say if you're a Timmy player, if you want to run a bunch of monsters, there's Gorgon, Psycho, Quake Free. That's great. If you like Dark Walker teleport shenanigans, um, then that's great for spikes who like that reliability, just being able to like dictate board. Or if you're like a Johnny and you like the game spawn tricks of like just debuffing and just trading, then that's for you. So like there is an army and there's a list for every kind of player in Beast of Chaos. So it's a really fun army. I think I like how accessible they made the army compared to the last book where you just have to take hordes and it just became this like weird like it almost felt like you were playing like a death castle army where you were just like being just way too effective what you're doing. And now this army feels thematic to what's in the lore of the army. And one of the biggest reasons why I started Beast of Chaos was because of the lore of the army and like it's just ambush ways. And that's why I got a tattoo of it.
Yeah,
to
I love
commemorate
you.
my love of the army.
I love your dedication. And as Joel McGrath used to say, friend of the channel, would say, like, when I run my Beast of Chaos, it used to be just waves of trash. Like, it was just like,
Yeah.
don't care, just waves of crap and just trying to trade up the whole time. But the last question I have for you, and then we can kind of like wrap it up and you can, give some shout outs, is if Dawnbringers was to hit Beast of Chaos, what new unit and or rules would you like to see added to Beast of Chaos? And by the way, folks, while I give Matt a quick second to think about his response, if you have any thoughts or comments or what you'd like to see in Beast of Chaos, leave it in the comment section. Don't tell me like Vestigor go down in points. Like be creative, be fun. What's the thing that it's missing right now?
I would like to see I would like to see a Dragon Ogre's Army of Renown, because in any of the Beasts of Chaos battle tomes, they always have a keyword called Thunderscorn, but we've never had a Thunderscorn sub-faction that like encourages you to focus around Dragon Ogres. And I think the reason why they didn't do that is because with how they create our Beast of Chaos sub-factions, they make it so that you don't have to take like, it's not centered around like a unit or a particular archetype. You could take most games of Beast or most units of Beast of Chaos in any of the sub factions. But I think because Army of Renowns tend to be more niche and they want to focus around like particular archetype, I feel like the Dragon Ogre archetype has never really been explored in Beast of Chaos, because I know from what I've heard in fantasy, they were a Warriors of Chaos unit that got moved to being in the Beast of Chaos unit. And I feel like in from what I've read in the Battle Tome, they actually are an important part of like our lore, but we've never really had and they have their own spell lore too and everything. But it'd be nice if we could just make an entire army of just Shaggoths and Dragon Ogres, and I'd be really excited to see if they would do something with that. So GW, if you're watching this video and you're making any last minute drafts to Dawnbringers 3 or 4, Dragon Ogre Army of Renown. Let's see it happen.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because if you look at the lore of the Dragon Ogres in Age of Sigmar, their lore is they're from Azir, which obviously is the home of Sigmar and the Stormcast Eternals. So it's actually, that's a really fascinating. I probably wouldn't have picked that. I was going to go the obvious, which is just more monsters. Like, let's just remove the Jabberslith completely. We've given up on the Jabberslith at this point. Give me some more monsters, because for me, I'm really drawn to the monsters of Chaos side, and I think there's definitely some more monsters. Update the Cockatrice sculpt, give me a bunch more monsters. I love monsters. Who knew the Gargant player liked more monsters? But
Yeah.
I think you made a good comment around the Dragon Ogres. I think there's a lot of design space, and you see that what they've done with Iron Jaws with the piggies, and they've built out the piggy range. Curious to
Yeah.
know what they would do with Dragon Ogres outside of just the Shaggoth and the Dragon Ogre models.
Yeah, I mean, if they gave us a bunch of new monsters for Monster Chaos, I'm all for it. I think the biggest thing that appeals to me about a Beast of Chaos Army Renown is if whatever they make, I hope that they're able to make an Army Renown of Beast of Chaos that isn't reliant on ambush. I want to be able to it'd be cool if they had like foot to be on the board. Maybe we lose ambush in that Army Renown, but then they give us other mechanics to make up for it, to show a different side of Beast of Chaos. So hopefully they do something cool like that. It would be a different way to play the army. I just hope it isn't like fundamentally like broken or like good or bad. Like I hope that like it's it doesn't need to be nerfed or like it's unplayable. I hope that like it creates a different play style in the army. So that's the hope anyway.
Folks, if you have a thought or a comment, I'd love to hear what you would love to see in BC. I'm sure there'd be a lot of opinions, right? Bring in more Centaur type models. Bring in more X. Bring in more Y. Let me know in the comments. Curious to hear from you. But Matt, any shout outs? And if people want to chat to you about Beast of Chaos more, where can they find you?
Yeah, so to find me to talk Beast of Chaos, you can join the, Age of Sigmar coach Discord in the Beast of Chaos chat. That's honestly where I mainly talk about my BOC list. I also want to shout out, not only you for letting me like talk about this army because like I love it so much. I also want to shout out the Beast of Chaos community there, because we bounce off ideas around each other a lot. We introduce things to each other, and there's just so much like good discussion. Even though like maybe some discussions like a tiny bit slow right now because we're all testing and figuring things out. It's a good community to talk to. I met some of I've had the pleasure of meeting some of these Beasts of Chaos players in real life, and even playing like 2 of them at Nova. So like it was great to have like that mirror match. And outside of them, I will also like to shout out, the SoCal region, SoCal United, the team that I'm leading. Like everyone on there is great. I like love that we travel together. I love that we like play. We're all friends with each other. We can mess around and have a good time. And I also like to shout out or not the region team, but my my hometown team, my local team, Age of Ligmar. It's kind of a clique of some us. Yeah. Feel free to ask me what Ligmar means, but
I think that's probably a whole video in itself. I got to ask you though, when do I get my SoCal shirt? Considering I'm a top performing member as per the ITC.
True. Last year you were our second place highest scoring, and you only played one event with us with your Sons of the Handlot. So yeah, no, we are. Trust me, something juicy's coming for you, and we would love to hang out with you again. Obviously, maybe you also need to see more people this time outside of just hanging out with us the whole weekend. But yeah,
who knows?
Can't wait.
Well, I'll be at LVO24, so I'll be repping there. But Matt, this has been awesome as always. High tide lifts all boats, in my opinion. So I hope that Matt has given you plenty of knowledge to think about how you play, whether you are heavy ambush, whether you're playing in monsters, whether you're playing into the debuffs, however you like to play Beast of Chaos. I think we've given you something for you, especially in the current season of the GBH23, and how we're thinking about Primal Magic dice. We're thinking about Hoarfrost Blizzard, the battle plans, yada, yada, yada. If you have any thoughts, please let me know in the comment section. Always appreciate your hot takes, your things that you build upon what Matt said, or maybe you disagree. Maybe you think the Jabberslike is the greatest model in the range that we just don't appreciate. Let me know why the Jabberslike is the best. Until next time, Matt, thank you so much. Everyone who listened to the video, hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found some value. And until next time, roll more 6s, or just don't roll 1s when you're casting a Blizzard. I think that's the key. Like, just don't roll more 1s.
Don't get greedy. Or be like me. 95% of gamblers quit before they win.
I was gonna say, or if you do it against me, roll all 1s. Just roll 1s. Roll 1s. Yeah. I appreciate it. All right, thanks everyone. Thanks Matt. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, have a good one, guys. Peace.
Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you pressed like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the episode description. I also want to give a massive shout out to the AOS Coach patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you are all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a double 1 on a spellcast.